G'day, mate. 40 here. So normally I don't do my long streams on a weekday morning with many exciting video excerpts. If I do a long stream, it's on a walkabout, but this morning is different. Why is this morning different from all other weekday mornings? I had a few minor setbacks that were minor but didn't feel good. And so to regain a sense of efficacy, to regain a sense that, I'm good at some things. Let me demonstrate to myself that I'm good at some things, that I have things to contribute to the world. Let's just do a long, deep live stream. And so here we go. Now, normally I wouldn't care about my collar, my shirt collar. Should it go outside my jacket or should it just be kind of covered up by my jacket? But because my ego's taken some hits of late, I need to figure out whether the dress shirt collar should go outside the jacket or inside the jacket. I need to regain a sense of self-efficacy, that I can do things, that I can learn, that I can react to the world around me, that I am competent, that I can stand on my own 2 feet, that I can be an adult, that I can move forward in life. But I do have some self-defeating habits. And one of them is I have a habit of isolating, particularly when I have setbacks, right? When I have setbacks, I really want to talk about them with anyone. And so I tend to go into a shell. And then as I go into a shell, I obviously lose contact with more people. And the more I isolate, the less effective I usually become in the world. And so my tendency is towards isolation to maximize my freedom and to minimize the annoyance of having other people in my life. That spiral is a downward spiral. That is not a good spiral for me. So I guess I could be calling friends, but I really don't want to call friends right now. Let me just live stream about the world, and that will make me feel better about myself. So here we are, and I do think that the collar looks better when it's outside the jacket. So normally when I live stream here from the home studio, I just wear one of my black shirts or my dark blue shirt, but I'm going with an edgy color. I don't know what to describe it. It's somewhat lime green. One sign of intelligence is your ability to distinguish between different colors, between different pitches of voice. You have an ability to accurately pronounce more words. And so you'll see that the more tired I am, all right, the more I stumble over my words, the more I muff pronunciation. And what the heck? What color is this shirt? But this assassination of the healthcare CEO fascinates me because as we find out more about the purported assassin, I find some disturbing parallels with my own life. Not that I've ever assassinated anyone or even come close to committing some heinous act of violence. But the same guy, he had back pain and he spiraled into isolation. And in his isolation, he came up with this idea, I assume, of assassinating this healthcare CEO. And I can identify with having setbacks or pain, misfortune, problems that then just make me feel like I don't really want to reach out to others. I want to isolate. I want to go into my cave and figure things out on my own. Then when I figure things out on my own, then I'll launch back out into the world. And I've done that repeatedly throughout my life. And sometimes it's worked out well. Sometimes it hasn't worked out well. I remember I moved to the United States in May of 1977. And when I was introduced to my future classmates at Pacific Union College, I'd be attending 6th grade with them, and I met them at the Pacific Union College pool. My reaction to meeting them was to immediately splash water in their face. And that is kind of how I've spent most of my life. I like challenging people and teasing people and provoking people and infuriating people. And this has not generally worked out well for me. It has compelled everyone in my life to set limits on me. Why do you have to be so obnoxious? Why can't you just settle down on making a living and spending time with friends and family like normal people? And I've been way too invested in provoking people. Why am I trying to provoke people? To the extent I can understand it, it's that if I provoke people and they get triggered, then I can tell myself that I am superior to them. And why do I have such a strong need to feel superior to other people? Perhaps that's a large part of the reason why I'm streaming right now. I want to show that I'm smarter than other people who are commenting on the news. And why do I have this strong need to demonstrate that I'm superior to other people? Because in my core, I feel inferior because my normal human relations have like hit some bumps that they're not going so great. I find myself falling behind my peers. And so to medicate, to feel better about myself, to push away that shame, I look for opportunities to demonstrate to myself that I'm superior to others. And one of the most frequent techniques that I've used for that is provoking people to then allow myself to say, oh, look, that bloke so easily triggered, or wasn't she sensitive? A good thing I'm not like that. And so that would then lead to more isolation because other people don't like being upset, right? My therapist, it took my therapist years to get through to me that when I'm deliberately provoking people, when I'm deliberately triggering people, when I'm deliberately offending people, I am deliberately hurting people, which is not good from the perspective of any moral system of which I'm aware, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or just normal practices of human decency, right? I am violating those, and I am much more prone to violate them the more self-loathing I fear, the more desperately I need to overcome my self-loathing. So instead of provoking people in real life right now to overcome this momentary light bout of self-loathing, I'm going to talk about Syria, and I'm going to talk about the healthcare CEO. I think this is a healthier way for me to deal with a few minor blows to the ego. So I read a terrific 2015 book by Michael Kochin, who's Israeli, who's American, a professor at Bar-Ilan University in Tel Aviv. He also has appointments in American colleges. Published this book called 5 Chapters on Rhetoric, Character, Action, Things, Nothing, and Art. All right, provocative title, sounds like a bestseller. And I was struck by this sentence from the 19th century American politician Daniel Webster. True eloquence must exist in the man, in the subject, and in the occasion. So I could say the most beautiful words imaginable. And if they come across as discordant with who I am, they will not help my social standing. Right? They won't help my ratings. They won't help my status. They won't help me in my personal life, in my professional life. They won't help me because they will be discordant with who I am. So eloquence must exist in the man. It must be there. It can't be just something that we artificially inject into our discourse if it doesn't ring true. All right, Ronald Reagan's speeches were effective, not because there were usually great lines in them. There were very few great lines in the speeches of Ronald Reagan, but they seem authentic to who he is. And so they come across as real, and because they come across as real, they then have the opportunity to move you. Right, and so true eloquence, right, must exist in the man. Your words, your actions must fit a narrative that people have about you or that people are predisposed to develop about you. And then in the subject, right? So the words that you use must match the subject and they must match the occasion, right? If 517 Americans were just killed in a terrorist attack, then I can use all sorts of beautiful words, but if they're not appropriate to the occasion, they will sound discordant. and it will not improve my status as some kind of rhetorical wizard. True eloquence must exist in the man, in the subject, and in the occasion. So true eloquence is not merely words or speeches. Right? True eloquence comes from action. We judge a speech against the narrative of the speaker and the character of the speaker as displayed in the speech, where we perceive the speech's clarity, purpose, resolve, and his spirit. So true eloquence is rare because most of us are determined in our course of action in life. We are conditioned and formed and incentivized by our pre-existing relationships rather than by words. Right? We're dominantly shaped by our relationships, not by any words that we hear. Right? It's only on rare occasions when the strength of words will sway people and will demonstrate something. Right? It's very rare that words alone will touch people, move people, and persuade people. Right? Words have to fit into the context of the individual and the occasion. And frequently, to maintain our relationships, we have to say all sorts of things that we do not mean. And if you're too honorable, if you're too ethical, you're too theoretical and philosophical, and you have too high a standing and too much optimizing for truth in your own mind, right? And you refuse to go along with these social niceties, that's not going to work out for you. Right? To maintain your position in the real world, you have to say all sorts of things that you don't believe. Right? You're at a cocktail party and someone is ranting about the United States needs to return to the gold standard. The appropriate thing to say is, that's interesting, as you move on. We consistently, politely misunderstand what other people say to us so that they in turn will misunderstand us. Right? Our relations are complex. They are changeable. Right? They are subject to decay over time, particularly non-familial relationships. Our relationships are fragile, and we preserve these fragile relationships by refusing to judge other people by the truth or the significance of the things that they say or that we say. So for most guys that they are as deeply flawed as we are. Now, I often claim to optimize for truth, but do I truly optimize for truth? Right? If I was genuinely optimizing for truth, and if I was genuinely disinterested, right? If I had no interest in what use is made of the things that I say and the facts that I provide, if I had no interest in my own reputation, right, I would not be a reliable provider of relevant facts and opinion, and I'd be of no use to you. It's only because I have a significant personal investment in what I have to say. Right? I have a significant personal investment in my own reputation, right, that I might be useful to you at all as a provider of relevant facts and analysis. Right? So we have no choice but to get our information and our analysis from interested and thus biased sources. And then we will tend to discount that interest that motivates our biased sources. We don't usually want to think about it. But I'm doing a live stream today so that I can feel better about myself, because I feel like I've got something to contribute about some of the things going on in the world around me. And so if I contribute to you, I will feel better about myself. And I get to avoid some humdrum responsibilities that I'll return to in a few hours, but I'm escaping from reality right now, from one part of reality to play the big man on YouTube. Whew. That wasn't easy to say. Let me catch my breath here. This is Joe McDonald, Step 3,
but
Big Book Study.
Do you get what he's calling your attention to? I'm trying to help, and I'm being modest and self-sacrificing. Okay, then on the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. Any of you ever experienced that? Yeah. But as with most humans, he's more likely to have varied traits. How many of you have discovered that? Yes. Okay. What usually happens?
Show doesn't come off very well.
Any of you notice that? Yeah. If every time you assume the worst of somebody because of the moment you met them in, do you not suffer from their difficulty rather than your own?
Yes. Yeah.
Don't you linger in the thought of what you saw versus what you know? How many of you hate it when you make a mistake for the very same reason? If every time trying to learn to separate human behavior from humans, because we're not going to learn to love humans until we learn to separate behavior from the being. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we got to learn to see what we see. Okay, so what usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. Any of you get that place? Why me? You ever had that? Oh, you got to be kidding me, right? He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious as the case may be, and still the play does not suit him. Have you ever wondered why that is? You're out of range and it all perfect.
Because I'm trying to manipulate people.
Yeah, and sometimes not even consciously. Right. So what I figured out what they were talking about is this is a show of my life. Right? Not to eliminate anyone else. Everyone reads this book personally. But this is the show of my life. And I couldn't figure out why nothing was going right, but every time the light panned to me...
Okay, a comment that I'm muted. Well, do you hear me now? So I'm usually pretty reliable, but I remember there was one time around 2002, I just completely forgot a lunch appointment, and then I've had 12-step phone appointments that I've slept through on occasion. Other times I've gotten sick and I didn't notify people that I would not be available. And there have been other times when I forgot to notify sponsees that there was a Jewish holiday and so I was not going to be available. But I'm about 99% reliable. And most of the time, if I'm not going to be able to make an appointment, I'll give 24 hours notice. So people really appreciate that, right? As much as possible, I find people don't like it when you cancel the last minute. People much prefer it if you can give them 24 hours notice, because if I have a 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., 7 a.m. appointment, that kind of sits on me the day before. When I go to bed, I kind of set an internal alarm clock that I need to be up to meet my obligations in the early morning. And so I don't enjoy it when people cancel on me last minute, and I don't enjoy it when I flake on other people or cancel on them on the last minute. I had an important appointment the other day, and I arrived 20 minutes early, but I could not find the address. I was just walking and running all over the place, just going back and forth across busy roads, trying to find the address, and then calling people. And it was right there on my GPS, but I couldn't quite understand it. I couldn't quite understand my Apple Maps. And eventually I found it with 5 minutes to go before my appointment. But thank God I arrived 20 minutes early, because I just went into a panic. So the more important the appointment, right, the more you want to ascertain exactly where it is and get there early and have your ducks in a row, because I panic, man. The anxiety. And I think what's going on here is that I have a fairly high level of anxiety operating within me most of the time. And then when little thing goes wrong, I finally notice the anxiety, right? The anxiety is probably almost always there. And it's probably always there because I tend to isolate more than is good for me. And isolation will usually, on the one hand, it sets up a destructive pattern, because on the one hand, when you isolate from other people, particularly when you have a setback, it calms your anxiety because you don't want to interact with others because you don't feel good about yourself because you've had some setbacks. So on the one hand, you reward yourself by taking the equivalent of a Vicodin. By avoiding contact with other people, you ease that anxiety that comes from setbacks. But then you establish a pattern where you will be more likely then to isolate the next time you have a setback again. And when you isolate, while initially it diminishes anxiety, it effectively increases it because it's not good for man to be alone. One of the rare statements of psychological insight that God gives in the Bible, I think it's one of the early chapters of Genesis, and he says, I think to Adam, right, it's not good that man shall be alone. I'm going to make a helpmate for you who will be your equal, who will challenge you and be your equal. And so I have set up a perverse set of incentives where I have minor, major, and moderate blows to my ego, and I deal with those by isolating. Often I just want to lie down until the anxiety diminishes and I get clarity on what I need to do. But developing this habit of isolating in the face of setbacks, right? I am rewarding myself with a temporary cessation of anxiety by engaging in behavior that will only make the anxiety worse. So I probably have this high level of anxiety operating all the time, but I'm not listening to it, right? I'm not listening to the whispers of having a suboptimal level of anxiety, suboptimal for my happiness. And so because I don't listen to the whispers, then when I have an important appointment and I can't find the location, right, then I hear the screams in my psyche and the panic just comes out of me because I'm not dealing with the whispers. And so the screams just overwhelm me. And then I am not at my best. And so to regain a sense of self-efficacy, I come on here and pontificate. Okay, let me talk about rhetoric. My father did a PhD in rhetoric. So my father was very good at rhetoric, and yet I read his PhD thesis, and I was unimpressed with it. It was the beginning of my removal of my father from a heroic pedestal. So about age 2021, I first read my father's PhD thesis on rhetoric. And over the course of the next year, I'd go to UCLA and meet a lot of other highly accomplished, very smart people. And I would change from a heroic conception of my father as a brave truth teller to a deeply flawed individual who was working out his wounds by saying controversial things about Christian theology. And so I went from seeing my father as this heroic truth teller to a deeply wounded man who had a lot of maladaptive habits in life and who I'd be wise not to emulate. But as countless girlfriends have told me, the more you try not to be like your father, the more you're going to be like your father. I remember I went to Loma Linda University in 2010. I was going to be a speaker on a panel about the Sabbath, Jews and Christians talking about the seventh-day Sabbath. And I was in a room with a bunch of people who knew my father. And one person said to me, well, what major difference between you and your father, Luke, is that you seem much happier. My father, even though he was a great performer in public, there was just this tremendous air of sadness about him privately. And so I remember those comparatively rare number of compliments where I can tell myself, oh yeah, I'm better than my dad in this area. And I tend to want to black out all the ways that I felt keenly inferior to my father. For example, my father was more intelligent than me. I would estimate by about a standard deviation. So I think my father had his IQ tested at 137. And when I have taken online IQ tests, I don't think I've ever scored above 125. Then my father was much more accomplished than me. He received 2 PhDs, and I didn't even graduate with a BA. My father got married and had kids. I never married, never had kids. My father had a brilliant career. He's got a very long Wikipedia entry, much longer than mine. He is influenced the lives of thousands of people. He has mesmerized tens of thousands of people with his public speaking. Not that these trivial matters occupy me at all. Right, facts. How do we determine facts? Right, facts are made in structures of knowledge, action, and art from which they derive their being and their interpretation. So facts are made or fabricated, but they are always made within a structure, a network of persons and community and things, right? An isolated person, which is my tendency, because when I'm isolated, I don't have to interact with other people. I don't have to deal with the awkwardness of other people and having them say painful things to me. I remember my first love. I was frolicking with her in the Pacific Union College swimming pool, summer of 1982. And this little black boy was swimming under the water, and he popped back up between me and my love. And he says to me, "Why is your penis sticking out like a lance?" So that's what happens when you interact with other people. They make some very painful observations. And I responded to him by having a reasoned dialogue about the biological facts of blood flow. No, I took his head and I dunked him under the water. And my sort of girlfriend, she like squealed and swam away. And then I chased after her, and I was so mortified that luckily my penis no longer was pressing through my shorts like a lance. I was now so thoroughly mortified. I swam after her, and I got out of the pool just to prove that my penis was not sticking out like a lance. But when you have other people in your life, that's what they're going to do. I'm going to have social interactions where I'm trying to impress some attractive young Jewish woman, and someone's going to come along and say, "Hey, Luke, let's talk about your first book, A History of X, 100 Years of Sex and Film." And that is not usually my favorite topic of conversation. So I've been selling my soul online. When you are a person who writes about himself and talks about himself a great deal publicly online, one way of understanding that is that you are monetizing or selling your soul in return for other people's attention. And so when you do that, you're likely to say a whole bunch of things that you feel quite vulnerable about. And just because people will share vulnerable things publicly doesn't mean that it's socially appropriate to throw it in their face privately or socially. On the other hand, I've often thrown things in people's faces privately and socially. And when girlfriends have said things to me that are very, very private and vulnerable for them, and then we've had an argument, unfortunately, I have sometimes thrown it back in her face, and sometimes they've reacted by just breaking up with me on the spot. They warn me, "You ever bring this up? You ever use this against me? I'm just going to break up with you." I bring it up, I use it against her, and she breaks up with me. That was the end of my relationship with former porn star Haley Rivers. She said, "Don't bring up XYZ. I brought it up. She broke up with me immediately. So good for her for having that level of self-respect. And I hated myself for doing it, but I couldn't stop it. I just couldn't help doing it when I felt insecure or anxious, right? If I don't listen to the screams, if I don't take care to make sure that I am listening to the screams and taking whatever steps I need to take to repair the screams and to repair the whispers and deal with it, then I am more likely to act out in a compulsive, self-destructive fashion. And when I act out in a compulsive, self-destructive fashion, it's never just me that is injured, right? I will then inevitably hurt other people, even if it's just hurting other people who care about me. Right? When I love someone and they're suffering, right, I feel bad. And so if I don't listen to the whispers, right, I'll have to hear the screams, and it won't just be my screams. Other people will be negatively affected when I'm not dealing with my own anxiety and my own compulsions. Right, back to this terrific book by Michael Cochin. So facts, right, what we think as a fact, that is always made within a community, within a structure, within a network, right? An isolated person builds only dreams, claims, feelings, fantasies, delusions, but not facts. Right? An isolated person does not build facts that are generally agreed upon as facts. That small are the advances which a single unassisted individual can make towards perfecting any of his powers. You cannot become a better person 99.999% of the time alone. Now, I'm not usually alone. Even when I'm alone, I have a sense and a feeling and a commitment to the relationships that are most important to me. And so you're not really alone if you are working out by yourself and you still have a sense and a commitment to a network and a community and a group of people. But on your own, without assistance, you're not going to advance in the world and you're not going to build up your talents. Here is a terrific insight from Steve Fuller. Faith in science marks a degree of deference to authority that is unparalleled in human history. So you're probably saying, who is this Michael Cochin bloke who you've been talking about a lot over the past couple of weeks? So let me play this 12-step talk on the big book while I find video. Michael Cochin.
Me, so I could play the role that was my life. I was out arranging the lights, the scenery, and the ballet. Show couldn't come off because I wouldn't play my part. Does that make sense? Some of you felt that. That was another first step experience. It's all right. We're not trying to crush anybody here. We're trying to, let's go on, man. This is about getting free of that illusion. Okay? All right. So
one reason I don't feel great this morning, and to assuage my feelings of not feeling great, I'm doing a live stream to pep myself up. And the Dallas Cowboys, they just gave away the game. They, with 2 minutes to go, right, they block a punt by the Cincinnati Bengals. The game is tied 20-20. They block a punt, and the ball bounces around. And then as long as no Dallas Cowboy touches the ball, the Cowboys are going to be set up by the 50-yard line, if not in Cincinnati territory. But a member of the Dallas Cowboy return team touches the ball, bobbles the ball, loses the ball. Cincinnati jumps on the ball, then drives down the field for the winning touchdown. And a higher degree of my sense of strength and joy in life, a higher percentage than I want to admit, comes from the fortunes and the misfortunes of the Dallas Cowboys, and they are stuck in such a self-destructive cycle. They haven't been to the NFC Championship game since the 1995 season. And why? What's the primary reason for that? Because their owner, Jerry Jones, insists on being the general manager, for which he is not cut out. And I don't expect the Cowboys to have meaningful playoff success until Jerry Jones is no longer the general manager, and there's just no prospect of Jerry Jones no longer being the general manager. Their quarterback, Dak Prescott, is the highest paid player in football, and he's 32, and he's slow, and he's not a great quarterback. But we are saddled with this ridiculous contract for Dak Prescott. He cannot be traded without his permission for years. The Cowboys are just not in a good position for years to come. And way too much of my sense of self and strength and confidence comes from my fandom of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, is there not enough in the Torah for me to be a fan about? Right? Is there not enough in the teachings of the great rabbis for me to be devoted to? Why does such narishkeit, such foolishness from the Goyim, right? It's a shanda that this affects my emotional well-being. Why do I allow myself to be knocked off any sense of stability by the performance of a 5-8 Dallas Cowboys team? It's not good. And so I'm doing this stream to tell myself, 40, you got to listen to the whispers before they become screams. Bloody hell. Right, just a little bit. This is Michael Cochin. Here he is.
Forms that's.
All right, this is Cochin here. Just so you know what he's looks like. All right, physiognomy is destiny.
That are
right?
the first chapter in our story today.
Okay, well, to put this story very crudely, and I've been following it since the mid-90s. The Israeli Supreme Court seized more or less absolute and unaccountable power back in the 90s, and took upon themselves the ability to review every piece.
So this is an interview that was published on YouTube July 22nd, 2024, right? So eloquence, right, depends on the man, his character, his narrative, his vision, and the situation. So that's why I often emphasize the date that a particular video was released. So this is July 22nd, 2024. Michael Cochin is the author of the book on rhetoric that I've been reading.
Piece of legislation for constitutionality and every administrative action for reasonableness, without any clear empowering in the law. This high-handed approach kind of escalated because when the elected branches started talking about reform and about formal constitutional changes to reign in the Supreme Court threatened that it would in fact strike down constitutional changes, which in the 90s, at the time, Aaron Barak, who led this revolution, said that the one way to rein it in would be constitutional changes, formal changes in the basic laws of Israel. But now the Supreme Court has arrogated it to itself the power to strike down basic laws. It has done so. And
so when I fall for a woman and then I start moving towards asking her out and she knocks me back, all right, that affects my sense of self and my self-esteem. It doesn't cripple me, but it hurts when I'm counting on a contract or a deal, right, that's going to put money in my pocket and then it falls through at the last minute, right? That hurts my sense of self. When friendships wane, right, much of my sense of well-being comes from my friendships. When friendships wane, right, that diminishes my strength. I have less vitality. So when things that I'm counting on or hoping for, when I create a conception of how things are going to be, and then things don't work out that way, right? It's a setback. So those sorts of things have knocked me back. So sometimes I get frustrated by the offerings on YouTube, and I go back to the great courses, aka those courses released by the teaching company. And I remember I was listening to one on the art of debate and rhetoric. And I spent about 2 hours on a Saturday night talking about how the only legitimate basis for a public debate on public matters is to contest matters of fact and matters of logic. And then Jim Goad came on the show, and then Nick Fuentes came on the show, and Baked Alaska came on the show, and we had that infamous, mudslinging personal attacks, just highly compelling, but not necessarily the most intellectual. So Bob says, my current boss is probably one of the highest IQ people I've ever worked with. That is a tremendous privilege. Generally speaking, I think I'd rather work for people with a high IQ than work for people who are nice or good. Wow, football is making you feel bad, 40, when there are real issues in the world. The government kills thousands of people daily, but it's illegal to mention. What's illegal? I think you can mention them. Go ahead. Be brave. I do think you can mention if government is killing. Now, government does kill by its choice of where it spends its resources. So the United States government invested hundreds of millions of dollars into AIDS research that could have gone to investigating other health problems. And so if some other health problem is killing people, but it gets much less funding than AIDS, then the government choice to spend on one health problem and not on your health problem, right, that does kill people. So government allocates resources, and government chooses which laws to enforce. And so government inevitably is backed by the power of the gun, and government inevitably kills thousands of people. The most upstanding governments inevitably kill people because they decide to send resources here rather than there. Even the greatest of doctors kill people inadvertently. That at least is what great doctors say, that in the course of a career, even the greatest doctor will kill people, 10 or more people, even if they are a great doctor. All right, so let me try to shift away from bruising to my ego and get back to this book by Michael Cochin. So when potential leaders are pushed by journalists, academics, and opponents to stick to the issues, right, to be specific on the issues, to refrain from mudslinging, the admonition is to avoid the only issue which a voter is competent to judge, the general character and trustworthiness displayed by candidates for office. So for years, I talk about the only honorable basis to have a public dispute about public things is to debate facts and logic. But then we determine how much we trust someone on the basis of what we ascertain to be their credibility and their character. And so this is a provocative point. The only issue which most voters are competent to judge is the general character and trustworthiness displayed by candidates for office. So maybe there are so many personal attacks, and the more public you become, the more you become vulnerable to personal attacks, because how people assess you is a useful guide for how much credence they give to the things that you say and do. Now, the more public you are, the more vulnerable you are to personal attacks, but that doesn't mean you have no influence on the degree of and the amount of the personal attacks. Meryl Streep is a public figure and a great actress, but you don't see her in the National Enquirer. She's not frequently gossiped about because she conducts her life and her work in such a way that she is not a topic of much public gossip, as opposed to, say, James Gandolfini. I just watched the 2-part HBO documentary on David Chase and the Wise Guys. David Chase was the creator of The Sopranos, and James Gandolfini had a great deal of trouble handling the responsibilities of being the lead character on the show The Sopranos. So he drank to excess, he took drugs to excess, he ate to excess, and these habits probably led to his untimely death at age 51 of a heart attack. And he would often react very badly to people in public. Sometimes he was a beautiful person to fans in public, but other times he'd get into shoving matches and shouting matches, and he would hit the tabloids such as TMZ because of his bad behavior in public. He wasn't handling the stress. And the head of HBO at that time arranged into an intervention with James Gandolfini's family and closest friends. They all gathered at the New York apartment of this HBO executive, and they were concerned about James Gandolfini. He would sometimes not show up for work. So more than 100 people were depending upon James Gandolfini doing his job, right? And sometimes James Gandolfini would not do his job. He simply would not show up for work. And this concerned a lot of people. He was drinking to excess, drugging to excess, just he was irresponsible. He backed HBO into a difficult corner and demanded a contract where he got paid over $1 million an episode. And he was irresponsible. He was self-destructive. So that type of behavior will elicit a reaction, right? If you're a jerk to other people, they're much more likely to be a jerk to you. Here's a great analysis of a phenomenon in the world of Northern Europeans, meaning the world of Canada, United States, England, Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavian countries. So there is an inherent unresolved discrepancy between the democratic insistence on amateurism in politics and the people's need for competent leadership. And this is true when you're a live streamer, a public speaker, you want to be a leader, you want to be a mental health activist, right? You have to demonstrate two qualities. One, that you're just like everybody else. and simultaneously you have a special expertise, right? It's the everyman heroic conflict. And if you're going to be an influential live streamer or public figure in any area, you have to master the everyman heroic conflict, right? People want you to be similar to themselves, so that's why you need to disclose your vulnerabilities if you're going to be a live streamer, podcaster, or a public personality, so that you can be relatable. Yet people simultaneously, they don't just want you to be like them, they also want you to excel in some area where they do not excel, right? The common man wants uncommon leaders. And how do we judge excellence? Right? We judge excellence in terms of an appropriate alteration of a tradition, rather than a simple reenactment of a tradition, rather than a completely new path. So Donald Trump harkened back to other figures in American politics, such as Joe McCarthy. Who was that Southern governor? Was it George Wallace, who ran for president? He harkened back to Pat Buchanan, some Ross Perot in him, some Roy Cohn in him. So Donald Trump didn't just blaze a brand new path in American politics. All right, he also developed an alteration of these American traditions. He didn't just simply reenact American traditional politics, and he didn't just invent a path out of whole cloth. So religions, like people, don't just emerge out of the ground. They build upon what was there before it. So Judaism, right, it built upon pre-existing concepts and stories that were already there in the ancient Mesopotamian world. So there were traditions, there were stories that were then transformed into the Pentateuch and other Hebrew writings that form the foundation of Judaism. And so you can believe that God is the author of the Torah, but that doesn't mean that God will not use the language of men to more effectively communicate his message. So even if you're a traditionalist and you believe every word of the Torah comes from God, it should not surprise you that God would take tropes, that God would take stories, that God would use the language of men to more effectively communicate to his creation. And Christianity built upon Hellenic mystery cult religion and upon the Hebrew tradition to create Christianity. And then Islam was a development on ancient Arab traditions, on Judaism, and on Christianity. So no spot in the world just belongs to people ipso facto, because people do not emerge out of the earth, right? Every entity, every group, every tribe, every state has been formed by one group taking over that territory and either expelling and or defending that territory from competitors. And no religion just comes straight down from heaven by itself. So you can believe in every traditional teaching of your religion and still recognize that when God comes to earth, he is going to speak to man in the language of man. So yeah, God breathed into the dust to create Adam. All right, I need a drink.
Where am I at? Okay, he becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? So have you got to that point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Guys, I've seen people over the years turn this to first person. The reason they wrote it this way is so it's not as assaulting on our ego in early growth. And so we want to discover ourselves in it without someone telling me that's me. I want to tell me that's me. I don't want you to tell me that's me. So don't rewrite them.
So one of my first sponsors used the big book, and we would read it, but we would translate it. So instead of we, it would be I. Right. So I would say, instead of we having this particular problem, I say I would have this particular problem, and then we discuss.
The book, man. Just experience the book, okay? Show people and bear witness. Does that make sense? Please. They wrote it the way they meant it. Okay, so am I not a self-seeker? When I was doing all these kind gestures humbly, how come I was offended by you not responding to my expectation?
Right, so I am trying to provide myself solace and comfort right now by pontificating about the wider world instead of simply dealing with my own sense of dissatisfaction and disappointment. And this can be functional in an appropriate degree. All right, so I am escaping from my humdrum, prosaic responsibilities right now. I am putting aside my normal responsibilities to make myself feel better. And I think there's a time and a place to do that. All right, I'm not going to do it all day. I have made provisions. I got started early, took care of some of my responsibilities. I let people know that I would certainly be available at such and such a time. But right now, I'm choosing to put aside making money to make myself feel better by sharing with you my wisdom about the wider world. And much of the way that I understand the world is listening to narratives about other people and figuring out what are my experiences of similar narratives, and that I share with you how I experience this, or how this is hitting me, how my sense is reverberating. So let's get Kip back onto the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, normally I wouldn't talk this long when you've promised talk this soon when you've promised a long stream, but you sound a little bummed out, like you needed a friend.
Thanks, bro. Yep.
Well, an online friend, dude, it's got to be something worse than the daggone Cowboys. Come on now. You know what Uncle Ted said about those surrogate activities. I'll give you this. It's a test of willpowers, that football is, and there may be no more ultimate test of willpowers. But when all those Alabama fans used to try to give me shit about them winning another national championship, I would remind them that the shittiest player on the bench don't even know their name. So why the fuck are they cheering? So anyway, you know what I mean? You can step out of that role of being a fan. I think you told me that's what you used to do when UCLA would get beat by USC.
Right, I can. And one of the ways that I do it is by admitting what's going on. So let's say you own a Ferrari, and your Ferrari, for no fault of your own, gets scratched, and you cry uncontrollably on your mother's shoulder because your Ferrari got scratched, right? That's your experience. That's your lived experience. Now, you can intellectualize it, but the way that we experience life is that we extend ourselves into the wider world, whether it's the Dallas Cowboys or our favorite couch or our favorite car. And there is no way to avoid that. If you love something, all right, you're extending yourself. You're putting yourself in that wider thing or person, and there's no way to avoid getting hurt. Which is why, if you're a normal Catholic and someone insults the Pope, it's a deep wound, because you have, as a normal Catholic, you should have some respect for the Pope, and so you can't escape the hurt and the pain of we inevitably invest ourselves in things beyond ourselves. Pass.
Yes, sir. You're right about things. Just take a simple car. I remember in 1992, I bought a little Mercury Capri, and I love that thing. And I caught on to the fact, I guess 4 months after ownership, that a question arose. Did I own it, or did it own me? It was a question of possession, Luke Ford. I thought I possessed it, but I'd be damned if it didn't possess me. You know what I mean? Making me treat it like a bitch. Making me walk 200 yards, from the parking lot so I wouldn't catch a door ding. Speak to me on how you're right. People something can possess you like that. Am I right, Luke Ford?
Yes, and you don't want to try to transcend that. It's just, it cannot be transcended. you will inevitably invest yourself in other people and other things, and you can then try to intellectualize what you're feeling, but it will be a deep wound. If I love my friend and my friend becomes an alcoholic, that will be a deep pain. Now, I shouldn't become dysfunctional over it, but there is no way to avoid this pain.
I'd like to ask you two things now. You've touched earlier on AA, and as someone who doesn't even drink Zima, I'm understanding how you got to that point of AA. Whatever you can talk about, and and the other thing I was going to ask is,
okay, let's do one at a time.
Okay, go that first.
Okay, so I always despised the 12-step approach because in step 1, you admit that you're powerless, and that just went completely contrary to my notions of personal responsibility. But then there was always a pragmatic side of me that was willing to just try things even if they didn't make sense. And so how did this happen? So I just started getting a series of prompts. So I was dating a woman with whom I had a turbulent relationship, and she said, my therapist says I'm a love addict. And just hearing that phrase, it resonated with me. It was in December of 2006. So I went out and read like 3 books on love addiction. I recognized that I had some tendencies in this direction. And then I was in therapy, and I'd written an essay on what I find most erotic. And I read it to my therapist, and he says, oh, that sounds like eroticized rage. And I was so taken by that phrase, eroticized rage. It just spoke to me that I just went home and I immediately researched it. And all the descriptions of eroticized rage rang true to me because I'd long used sex, masturbation, pornography to kind of assuage my rage and discomfort in life. And as I researched eroticized rage, one thing I learned was that it's a symptom of sex and love addiction. And so I thought, oh, what the hell? Let me try going to a 12-step program. So I came back to therapy and I said, I think I might be a sex addict. And so my therapist said, well, there are all sorts of 12-step programs that address this, but I recommend that you try this particular program. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And it took about 3 weeks. I didn't rush off to it, but I went to a room that's quite dingy. But then when people started sharing, I was able to find something to identify with from virtually every share. And then I connected with some guys after the meeting, some of whom had known about me from newspaper and magazine stories about me. And I there's just, my soul says that I'm at home. There's a saying that when you're called by your true name, you'll recognize it. And so I felt at home, even though for a long time I just rebelled against this idea of being helpless before an addiction. But I thought, I'm just going to try it, even though I don't cognitively agree with this approach. And then I found that the approach works, even though I didn't cognitively agree with this or that. It just worked. And so I experienced the pragmatic benefit just from the first meeting or two. The nastiness and perversity of my fantasies calmed down just from going to some meetings. So I was getting a very quick pragmatic benefit from entering the program. And so I just started going deeper and deeper into the 12-step world because of the pragmatic benefit, not because of the ontological certitude that I had about its founding principles. Okay, back to you.
When I get an image of those 12-step programs, I'm old school, so the image is a bunch of dudes sitting around smoking cigarettes. You know what I mean? They're not even allowed to do that now, I bet, right?
Oh, no.
They're probably saying chew gum.
Well, there's a lot of cigarette smoking. Now it may take place more outside the meetings. So one great saying I like about 12-step meetings is it's a room full of sex addicts who no longer drink. About AA, it's a room full of sex addicts who no longer drink. So different addictions will kill you at different rates. And so for many people, it's far healthier for them to be addicted to sex and to be addicted to cigarettes than to be addicted to alcohol or drugs. So there's a very common trajectory. People first get sober from drugs and alcohol, and then they get sexually sober, and then they get financially sober. that's a common trajectory. So not every addiction will kill you equally rapidly. So what you want to do from a pragmatic perspective is get a handle on the most dangerous addiction you have operating in your life. And quitting is tiring, exhausting, and people will often then need to fill that hole. So when I started getting sober from porn addiction and sex addiction, I started acting out a lot in my Facebook posts. I tried to fill the hole in my soul that I used to fill with pornography and sex with acting out online and attention seeking. And that was better for me than looking at pornography. But eventually I had a lot more work to do. But yeah, for many people who are alcoholics and drug addicts, smoking cigarettes is a far better way to find some comfort than drinking and drugging.
Right. What is it about you Jews? Ever since the Freud and them, as soon as psychiatry started, it was almost makes me wonder if they weren't jealous of those Catholic confessionals. So Jews come up with therapy. Is there anything to that? Is it just the back and forth dialogue itself that's bringing someone relief? You think that's what it is? Because from someone looking from afar, they look awfully the same. You know what I mean? Look forward.
Yeah. So it's not surprising that Jews were so influential in developing therapy, because Judaism has always been more open to the truth of the natural passions. And instead of Protestant Christianity, where you're supposed to transcend the natural passions because you have such a joyful relationship with Jesus, Judaism and therefore Jews have tended to be much more open about the natural passions for honor, for power, for prestige, for status, for sex, for money. And so because Jews have always felt more comfortable discussing the natural passions when compared to the non-Jews around them, the therapy would develop where you talk about these natural passions that are considered socially inappropriate. Jews were always much more comfortable with that. Also, Ashkenazi Jews tend to be high in verbal IQ. And so people high in verbal IQ, they're going to find more sustenance and healing from talking about things rather just talking about it usually will help a lot of people. And I just got an email today from a friend who used to go get TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and the place where he went, the institute, he claims that the president of this institute told us that Chinese medicine doesn't really work, but it gives the patient a chance to talk about their illness, and this is what helps them. And so for many people, they will get some healing and some benefit from just talking, and from usually you get acceptance from your therapist. Whatever you want to talk about is usually going to be okay. And so the forming of a relationship with a therapist or forming a relationship with a sponsor helps, because whatever your problems are with other people, they're inevitably going to come out in that relationship. And if you can learn to develop a relationship with your therapist or your 12-step sponsor, that will then have benefits extending out through your life. So, for example, some of my sponsees, they will not show up for scheduled sessions, or they will cancel at the last minute. And so it helps them when I bring up to them, it's important that you try to cancel these things when you need to, at least 24 hours in advance. And so if they don't do the homework, right, that's not just a pattern that they have going on in my relationship with them as a sponsor and sponsee. That's likely a pattern throughout their life where they're not living up to their responsibilities. And so when we discuss and work through why they're not fulfilling their side of the deal, why they're not doing their assignments, when they get clarity on that and make some improvement in that area, it's you're polishing here to shine there, to use the Karate Kid metaphor, where the kid was initially just polishing the teacher's car, but many of the moves that he was using in polishing the teacher's car, they were then useful in the art of self-defense. Pass.
Early you spoke of love, and it made me think of those 12-step programs. A man is seized. He's actually captured when he's fallen in love. You know this, right?
Yeah,
It's
a form of insanity.
He has very little control in the matter. You know, it's a seizure. He's been possessed, actually. Do people ever make it into 12-step programs because they just can't get rid of this woman? You know, they've just been seized or captured, and they know she's no good for them. You know,
Yeah,
but it's
so-
worse than crap.
Yeah,
Does this happen in real life or just in my mind?
No, all the time. It's not just what you're talking there about a very common pattern where you have the pursuer and the person running away. And so what another way of understanding this is the anxiously attached person, who is usually a woman in a relationship and usually the pursuer, and the avoidant, who wants to minimize the amount of intimacy and tends to run away. But two avoidants rarely connect and form relationships, right? Avoidants deliberately attached to anxious and pursuer types because they know they need more intimacy, but they're just not able to sustain it. So it's just not as simple as, I just can't get rid of this person. You brought this person, you have this person in your life for a reason. So if you're an avoidant, there's a part of you that recognizes you need more emotional intimacy. And so you will likely only have relationships with women who are pursuers, who are anxious. And so it's a pattern that you have that is not serving you. So if you find that you're having relationships that aren't serving you, if you're finding you're having employment that's consistently not serving you, if your inability to pay your bills on time, or your inability to spend money effectively and efficiently, if you're in some kind of self-defeating pattern, this can often usefully be understood as some kind of addiction is operating.
Yeah, I told you early on I was seized, captured by that 10 I had talked to you about before. But later on I could see through it, and it became a thing of, do you want to like willingly go through this and let her just wring out of you every ounce of whatever's in you, or do you just want to go along like everybody else? You know what I mean? And I think maybe I chose the latter. But I still wonder.
Wait, I want to jump on that, because that relationship was not the problem. That relationship was a symptom of a deeper problem. And so you may think you've resolved that problem, that you have a pattern and then you fix it and you think you've solved it. But what you're fixing, what you think you're solving, these interactions that you think you've solved, no, these are all just symptoms of something much deeper. And so you deal with the symptom, but the underlying problem is still there, and it's still going to bite you in the ass in all sorts of ways until you get down to the deep reason why it sounds like you are emotionally avoidant, and it sounds like you consistently have gotten into relationships with someone who's anxiously attached, aka a pursuer, and simply finding the strength to cut her out of your life is not the solution. It's only the solution to that particular symptom of a much deeper problem that is not getting addressed. So that relationship you just described, that was the scream. And it only became a scream because you were not dealing with the whisper. And so you got the woman out of your life, but you are still hearing the whispers of this problem in your life. And you're either going to attend to the whispers and get to the deeper reason why you're hearing the whispers of a problem, or they'll just keep popping up again and again and again, not necessarily in the form of a romantic relationship, but in some other form.
Damn, Luke, you're good, you son of a bitch. You're pretty good at this. I was gonna tell you what I told myself and everybody else, which is that I was just looking for an 11. You know what I mean? And but the scale only goes up to 10. Or maybe I could tell you that I was looking for a 10 that was a little bit more book smart. You know what I'm saying?
But you're phrasing this. Let me jump in here. You're phrasing this in a way that feels acceptable to you. What you're really looking for is something that would make you much more vulnerable to share. So the beauty, yes, the beauty and the sex and the book smarts. It was all a way for you to feel at ease in the world. And you were hoping you were hoping for someone to come along and make you feel whole, make you feel at ease in the world, and you would rationalize it and cognitively understand it in terms of beauty and book smarts, but something much deeper and more vulnerable is really going on, in that you're seeking for an external solution to an internal problem. And the only way that you will feel comfortable describing this need to yourself is in terms of beauty and brains, because that's socially acceptable for men to share. Go ahead.
I think it was more a fear of commitment, Luke Ford, 10-4. You follow me? I think it was fear of commitment, or maybe just the love of playing the field. But man, you want to talk about a bird in the hand. I'm not blowing sunshine up your ass. She was a 10. You get what I'm saying, Luke? And it took me a while to realize that she wasn't just a 9, she was more of a 10, because dudes couldn't help themselves. They would get captured. They, you know what I mean? They would get possessed when they saw her. And it took me a while to like realize that. And I don't know. I just don't feel like I was willing to.
Right. But that again, we frame our experience in a narrative that is acceptable to us. So when you talk about fear of commitment, it's actually something deeper. It's a fear of parts of yourself and your own needs. Like, human beings are incredibly needy creatures. We never graduate from our neediness. And so we will express this neediness in terms of, I wanted a 10, I wanted a woman who was book smart, I wanted hot sex. But what's really going on is some primal and incredibly vulnerable need that you only feel comfortable expressing in terms of beauty and hot sex. But there was something much deeper that she was fulfilling in you. There's a yearning and a vulnerability and a neediness in you and in me and in everyone that verges on the impossible to say out loud. But what was it that this 10 would do for you? Like, what would the great sex and having a 10 out of a 10 woman in your life, what was that doing for you inside? How was that healing you?
Oh, dude.
Go ahead.
You're a winner. You get what I'm saying? On the grandest scale. You get what I mean?
Yeah. You felt like a winner. You felt like a winner in life. And why was feeling like
I had won. I had won. I had won. But it's just that nobody realizes, the trophy. Everybody else thinks the trophy is fancier than you do. I told you at that time, the way you like the Cowboys, I like to sit around and watch the Baltimore Orioles on home team sports. But I'd get in at 5:30 after a long day of making sales, and there she'd be. She'd have some enigma going in the bathroom with 100 candles all lit up, wanting to get all passionate and stuff, Luke. I can't just jump in and out of that. I'm not a machine. I've heard you say this before, Luke, right?
Right, but let's go underneath that. It's not just that she made you feel like a winner, but really what's going on there is that without that, deep inside, a significant part of you feels like a loser. And she made that part of you quiet. She calmed down that part of you that feels like a loser, but that part of you is still there, and it's still unaddressed. And it's still going to come out in all sorts of different ways until that part of you is adequately addressed. So the socially acceptable narrative that we say to ourselves is, she made me feel like a winner. But the darker shadow truth here is that I usually feel like a loser, but I don't feel comfortable articulating that narrative to myself, let alone anyone else.
You're always looking for the obverse. You would have made a good therapist. I don't know if that's an accurate read, that particular read, but I get what you're saying there. But back to the original talk, that being captured by love, being possessed by that. I actually got to thinking about this and what your opinion was going to be based upon. I was just reading some Plato, the Phaedrus, and unfortunately, Luke, there is far too much man-on-man love going on in those books.
Yeah.
It takes something away. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
It takes something away, but that it retracts from the overall effect of me liking the book. I like it a little less because their morals are a little bit fucked up compared to mine. They're just different. But the point was that capturing, that being in love. Okay, is that as close to God as you get? You get what I'm saying? Is that a gift from the divine? Okay, there's answer A.
Well,
Or
it's an
B.
escape from reality. It's an insanity, right? Falling in love has all the
That's what I'm
hallmarks
saying.
of
It's
mental
madness.
illness.
That was number 2 was going to be, was it madness? Is it a gift from the divine? Is it madness? Is it neither? Is it both? Take it from there,
It's
Luke.
both and more. It's highly functional for the normal person, right? For a normal person, falling in love is highly functional because it will encourage you to form a commitment and a bond. And then when you reproduce with that person, you'll stick around to help raise the offspring. So it is adaptive for most people. But for about a third of the population, the intensity and excitement of falling in love is addictive. And because it occurs to people who don't have normal relationships, it leads to the pursuit of that addictive high, and it becomes maladaptive. So for most people, falling in love, perfectly healthy, wonderful thing to do, helps you to pair bond for a long time to help raise kids. But for about a third of the population, it becomes maladaptive.
I wanted to weave out of there for a second and ask you, that bumper sticker that's on all your content that talks about the 2024 U.S. election, are you doing that, or is YouTube doing that?
That's YouTube.
Did you run afoul in some way where they said we're going to have
everyone.
to keep you?
No. You see, that's a great question. When things like that prop up, people go, "Oh, is this directed at me personally?" But everyone discussing the 2024 election gets that YouTube disclaimer.
But you don't always discuss the election. Does their algorithm just say Luke Ford discusses the election at a high enough percentage where we just need to run the banner and keep
correct.
everything copacetic? That's
Correct.
what's going on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned some names like Baked Alaska and some people that frankly I didn't know. But the way I feel is YouTube used to be free, and then it got real hard to breathe. You couldn't fart in the wrong place and not get kicked out of there. But now it seems like it's a little easier to breathe. Maybe
Yes.
not as easy to breathe in 2018, 2019. Give me the synopsis of how this has went, that, because you're having to navigate this shit. So I'm sure you're having to catch all the breezes as they come. Tell me about it.
So when you had COVID and tens of thousands of Americans were dying of COVID, YouTube leaned into more restrictions of how you could discuss COVID under the principle of care. So if harm minimization is your number 1 or number 2 value, you are going to restrict speech on your platform. And harm minimization was a major value for big tech, particularly during the first year or so of COVID. And if in life in general, harm minimization is a number 1 or number 2 value for you, you are going to be for significant amounts of speech restriction. Then after a time, YouTube dialed back on that. So for the first 18 months of COVID, I think you couldn't say anything negative about wearing a mask. And so if I did a video where even though I was for wearing a mask in enclosed spaces, but I thought it was not particularly helpful when outdoors, that video would be deleted and I'd get a strike because YouTube was operating from the harm principle. Then YouTube backed off on that. YouTube, based on the harm principle, also did not allow any content that questioned the efficacy of COVID vaccines. But after a couple of years of the COVID vaccine, then they backed off on that restriction. So part of it also comes from Elon Musk bought X. Elon Musk opened up speech on X. And so YouTube had to compete with Rumble and with X. And so while initially when Donald Trump denied the 2020 election results, and that led to January 6th, then all big tech started restricting any speech that questioned the legitimacy of the 2020 election because they could point to real world harm that came from questioning the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Then after about 2 years, YouTube backed off on that. So there are all sorts of things that YouTube has backed off on. So to the best of my knowledge, I don't think I've received a YouTube strike in 2 years, though I did have my YouTube Shorts channel, Luke Ford Shorts, has been heavily restricted. So none of the content on there got a strike, but the algorithm detected enough transgressive material that while it wasn't bad enough to get a strike, they made all sorts of limits on the channel. So I can upload no more than 10 videos, and there are all sorts of other functions that are not available to me on that channel as a way of restricting this kind of transgressive content. So they'll restrict the ability of a lot of content to be found. All right, they will remove it from the YouTube promotion algorithm.
Yeah, I don't know if it was 20 or 2021, but one night in the wee hours of the morning, they just like took the power from a lot of us YouTubers and won't even let us comment. Is there a way back in that situation?
Yes, start a new account.
Well, how do you do that? They're owned by Google, aren't they?
No. You just start a new Gmail account. So you start the account Kip Loves Jesus 28 at gmail.com, and then you'll be able to comment under that account until you run afoul. And depending on the severity of how much you run afoul, they might eventually say block your IP, and so their strategy won't work. But normally you'll be able to just keep opening new accounts.
10-4 on that. I guess it'd be worth trying. Okay. I was going to ask you a little bit about, you said your dad was a rhetorician, right?
Yes.
Okay. And man, on one hand, I don't really think about, I wouldn't really want to be a debater or a rhetorician so much so, but I wish when one of them snappy liberals, was talking to me, I wish I could quote enough John Stuart Mills and Rawls and John Locke just to like stick it back and give it to them with interest. You know what I mean? What do you call that? What do you call that technique? Is that rhetorician where you can just quote those guys that are long since dead?
Yes. I mean, that's rhetoric. It can also be flaming. It's also, here is how I, fight for my hero system. So it is defending. It is trying to make converts for your hero system. It's SHIT posting. There are many terms for it, but most people wish that they had snappy rejoinders easily available to them at a time and a place that they think is most appropriate.
It's just so boring, to actually read all that stuff from those guys. Plus, the thing I tell you is the stock of people we got now, they ain't living by the same rules as those people. They ain't made of the same stuff. They don't treat their deities the same way. So you can't really compare apples to apples on that, in my mind. But I was going to say, when you were saying
Wait. Let's just focus on what you just said. So when I say they simply have a different hero system from you, and so they have a different notion of right and wrong, fair and unfair, heroic versus cowardly, they have a different conception of truth and freedom and legitimacy. How does that strike you?
It strikes me as what they're talking about might work for just a small group of people, but not countrywide. They don't stop, not working large scale. And not only that, Luke, they've had all their schemes. That's what's been instituted in the past 60 years. Do you have the same sense of community running around LA now that you had when you first got here in 77? Is it better or is it worse?
I would say overall there's less social cohesion, social trust in Southern California now as compared particularly to the 1950s. So it's hard for me to argue for a different hero system from my own. But do you recognize the subjective fictional component of your hero system, that we all develop a system of right and wrong, cowardly and heroic, to give our lives meaning? And you have one hero system. I have a slightly different hero system from yours, and then people on the left have completely different hero systems from ours, but we're all imposing a hero system on the universe to give meaning to our own lives. Or do you think that your hero system simply reflects what is universally true?
I think I'm willing to live it, and they're just giving lip service. You know what I'm saying? I was willing to sign my name on the line and go be a Marine, and they're willing to just maybe put in a flag in a flagpole, you know, but they don't show it any other way. Not that I'm saying they should have picked up a rifle. I'm not saying that at all.
So you're convinced that you're right, they're wrong, and that you're a better man than they are?
More times than not, but I know there's exceptions to the rule, as always, in there, Luke.
So what do you think about this conception of hero system? That we all have a hero system, we all invoke a system of what's right and wrong because it gives our lives meaning, and we're able to fuse our lives to something that's going to live on beyond us, and therefore it's how we handle the fear that our life has no significance.
I think that it's hard for somebody to hold whatever truisms they think. I think there's a lot of outside influence. So yes, I believe in that, but I also believe that disturbances, everybody's got so much disturbances from the government or whatever that's trying to tell them how to think. I think a lot more of that goes on than you realize.
So
I think we're dictated. Most people are. There's an attempt to dictate us from on high. And you may be right. That may only work fully on 20% of the population, but to a certain degree, it works on another 65, 70% of us.
So to what degree do you recognize your need for a hero system that gives your life meaning and purpose, and keeps at bay the fear that your life has no meaning and no purpose?
I don't know. When you say hero system, I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I'm thinking about like grown-up men running around in tights when you're talking about hero system. So
you have a system of meaning. You have a system of right and wrong and a system of meaning, without which your life would feel pointless.
Right.
Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. So you subscribe to a system of meaning and a system of right and wrong to give purpose and meaning to your life.
Okay.
And so does everyone else. It's just that everyone else's hero system is going to be somewhat differently, but we all need something to hang on to that transcends ourselves, right? A system of what is right and wrong, because without it, we're just like meaningless actors in a world devoid of greater meaning and purpose.
Right. But I think the words, I guess I think more like Socrates, where it's best to have just a few platitudes you can really stick by, than just spread yourself real thin and say, I believe this and I believe this, because you start putting it out there so thick, they're going to start overlapping, and you're going to be conflicting yourself, So
to what degree do you think that your system of right and wrong is just objectively true, and to what degree do you think it is subjective, something that you chanced upon due to your genetics, your early imprinting, the socialization you received, and the incentives that you have faced?
I don't know. I just, the golden rule: treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And I guess I subscribe to Epicurus's theory of happiness. All you need for happiness is friends, freedom, constant reflection, And I amended one thing to that, just meaningful and measurable goals. And, you know, I try
But
not to
you
extend
didn't
my.
answer my question. To what extent do you think that your understanding of right and wrong is just objectively universally true? And to what extent do you think it is socially conditioned and genetically conditioned?
I think it's objectively true, but maybe it's some of that other stuff that you're saying, you know, because we live in a time where you can't even, if somebody's got a lower than 70 IQ, you can't even make them stand trial for murder. Is that right?
You can't put them to death if they can stand trial. They will still stand trial, but you can't put them to death if they have an IQ below 70. So let's say that your hero system is 50%. No, everyone's sense of right and wrong is 50% genetic and 50% socially conditioned. So we just leave free will out of it just for discussion's sake. How would that then change your life? So, for example, if that were true, then there would be no reason to get angry at people for having a different conception of right and wrong when you recognize that one's own conception is based half on genetics and half on social conditioning.
Okay. Okay.
So, how would that affect you if or
you're saying social conditioning? You're just saying the greater good for the greater number in the most basic form, right?
No, I didn't say anything like that. I said, let me restate it. If our understanding of right and wrong is 50% based on our genetics and 50% based on social conditioning, and therefore there's no room for free will, it would be difficult to get mad at anyone for having a different conception of right and wrong.
Okay.
Well, you believe in the power of genetics, right?
Yes, I do believe in the power of genetics.
Okay, so the more you believe in the power of genetics, the less reason you have to get mad at anyone, because you recognize that genetics is programming them.
Right, but it's not all. It's not all that's programming them. Everything around them, you know, they're them plus the universe and what's going on in their head and outside their head in that time and space in that moment. That's what's deciding what they're going to do.
Do you believe in free will?
In theory, but most people don't have it. They're consumed by their passions. If they have it, they have very little bit of it. You know what I'm saying? Very little.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I was going to ask you earlier when you were talking about your mind being clouded. Have you ever tried any sort of thing like a mantra, or is that too far out? As far as like to try to get you back in the moment and get whatever's, you know.
Yeah, meditation. I mean, did you watch The Sopranos?
Maybe the first year or two that it was on. I remember the guy, Gandolfino, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, the protagonist got therapy, and by getting therapy and learning to deal with his fainting spells, which were he would panic and he would faint. By getting therapy to deal with those, he became a more effective mobster. So everyone can become more effective through clearing the mind. And so I've used them. I meditate at times. Sometimes I meditate every day. Sometimes I'll go 2 weeks without meditating. The most frequent mantra that I've used is beginning heals. I feel some benefit from meditation. So I use a Dan Siegel Wheel of Awareness meditation exercise. It lasts about 30 minutes. Yeah, I find quite a lot of benefit from it.
I tell you, you remember that Talking Heads song, "Letting the Days Go By"? You remember that song?
Not
from
sure.
The Talking Heads.
Not sure.
I don't know. That part of this in the song, it goes, "Same as it ever was, same as it ever was," and he says that over and over. That's a very good mantra. Another good one that I heard years ago, Robert Anton Wilson said, was "Shamati Shawati." He said it works like a windshield wiper for the mind. He said, you say Shamati Shawati, Shamati Shawati, Shamati Shamati, Shamati Shawati. Whatever the heck you were thinking about, it'll be gone after a few seconds, after a few Shamati Shawatis. But anyway, it sounds like you've already used that before. I was going to say,
hang on. So have you done Kundalini yoga?
Heaven forbid. What is that?
Oh, it's a very mantra heavy form of yoga. So it's something that I did for a couple of years, and so yeah, there were a ton of there were a ton of mantras, and yeah, I enjoyed my 2 years in Kundalini yoga. I have a weakness for cults because when you join a cult, right, they celebrate you and you feel included and a part of something bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to tell you when you were sort of down on yourself, I was going to try to tell you about an embarrassing time I had when I was in Norway. I had me a little Norwegian girlfriend, blonde hair, blue eyes, just the way pretty much most of them are up there above the Arctic Circle. And we had been getting along swimmingly, and she wanted me to meet her family, right? So I was like, well, that'd be cool. And of course, I had packed my sea bag with all kinds of like personal clothes and stuff, but we had been there maybe a month and a half, and we didn't have all the laundry arrangements worked out. So the only problem I had was dirty socks. I had dirty socks. They didn't smell bad, but they were dirty. And lo and behold, it was time to go to her parents' house, and I met them, and I knew there was trouble because you could see it was set up like a Japanese house where there was like a dozen pairs of shoes outside. And sure enough, the first thing he wanted to do was sit around and meet his daughter's new boyfriend. And he wanted to sit on the floor in our sock feet. And I mean, man, I was so embarrassed, Luke. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how I made probably the whole country of America look bad with those dirty socks that night?
Right, but those dirty socks are just they're a symptom of something deeper.
You son of a bitch.
But I would like to. My feet have often gotten cold. Often just suffered from cold feet. So I tend to keep my socks on during sex. I don't like cold feet during sex. So I'm wearing nothing often but a condom and socks. How about you? Do you like to keep your socks on during sex?
I hadn't really thought of it. I probably should have taken my socks off that night, but we were above the Arctic Circle, Luke. You get what I'm saying? I would probably look pretty stupid walking in there with bare feet on. So anyway, before I get off, can I ask you about a little bit about Luigi Magione?
Sure.
What do you think so far about this prep school valedictorian?
That story is just absolutely fascinating to me. I'm going to share a lot of thoughts as we go on today on this show. I just recognize some things in him that I recognize in myself, in that he has become increasingly a loner prior to lashing out. That becoming a loner is really bad for most people. Now, I'll give you credit. I think becoming a loner has been, you stand on your own 2 feet, and there's just so much about you that I find highly impressive. But he became a loner, and he was driven crazy by his back pain, and then an exploitative back pain industry, an exploitative back pain industry drove him mad, and he was looking for significance in life. The conventional path was not working for him, and so he made this gigantic bid for a feeling of significance. That after we meet our basic needs, I think our biggest, most pressing need is for importance. And so whether it's Lee Harvey Oswald or the shooter of the healthcare CEO, it's a thrust for importance. It's a way for people who are not winning at life to help themselves believe that they're really significant.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't fit the profile of someone who would have been sitting out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, bundled up in New York City, waiting for a CEO to go by. There was no, I heard people trying to scour his internet. There was no like hatred to this guy. It's almost weird. It strikes me weird in the same way that guy, Las Vegas, acted all crazy at a country music concert or whatever. It's like these people have lives that others would die for, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, I mean, that was one thing that I noticed about myself, Luke, is when I kind of threw off the yoke of going about it the way everybody else was going about it. I had to take care of the money situation, but once I took care of that, I said, okay, here I am. There's this could go anyway. And that's why, like someone like me, although I don't like LeBron James or I don't like Alex Rodriguez for the Yankees, I think they did have a hell of a thing the way they were able to get hundreds of millions of dollars put in their hand when they were 18 years old and not go make a fool of themselves the way I would have. You know, I would have been thrown in jail several times. What about you, Luke? If someone had given you $250 million as an 18-year-old, there wouldn't have been no stopping you, would there, Luke?
Right. I probably wouldn't have behaved like a righteous man. So I think the biggest predictor for adultery is opportunity. And so when you get that kind of money or status, it just opens up all sorts of self-destructive predatory opportunities that
Right,
it's
and
very
this-
hard to say no to.
Yeah, and this Luigi Magione, he's a good-looking boy, right? No
Yes.
homo, but he
Yeah.
seemed like good. Had six-pack abs, had a lot of things other people would like. I'm sure that valedictorian in that Maryland school, that he had parlayed that into Penn. Was he at Penn, or was he supposed to be going to Penn? Where was his life right at this moment, Luke? The best as you have found out.
I'll have to pay more attention, but it seems that he had a BA and a master's degree in computer science, and he'd been living in a commune for self-help and moral regeneration in Hawaii. And then I think he left that commune. He cut off contact with his family and friends. And so he was in a spiral of isolation in the previous few months.
The weird looking kid in Butler, PA, I think it was
Yes.
weird that he was so
Yes.
young, but that to me, that weirdness fit more the profile than the guy next door, Las Vegas shooter, or this good looking kid down the street that probably had 4 or 5 girls wanting to get his number. Isn't that the way they got his face? Is some woman was taken by him, wanted to see his face. That's the only reason they even got the lead, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be. So he was not your typical loser. I mean, most people would consider him a winner at life, and it appears that his family had more money and more resources than the family of the CEO who was murdered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just goes to show. I guess I'm still taken aback by that guy in Las Vegas that was able to bring all those guns in and all that. And he could have been, however much money it took to do that, he could have been having fun with that. But Luke, apparently there was no fun in his life. He had that dude in Las Vegas had a romantic interest. The lady was crazy about him. No reason in the world whatsoever. And I think about this same guy in Maryland, and nothing makes any sense. And I'm seeing more and more of those where that Butler, Pennsylvania guy, he was a little weird looking, but this Maryland guy, it almost makes me think, is there more to the story that we haven't seen? You would think there would have been some vile posts about United Healthcare or this guy, Brian Williams in general, for him to have just picked him out and hunted him out at 6 o'clock in the morning. Wouldn't you think? It almost seems like somebody wanted his job or something. You get what I'm saying? It almost.
I'm sure that there'll be more to it, but I think it boils down to trying to understand the shooting is that Luigi wanted to feel important, just like Lee Harvey Oswald wanted to feel important. And is it Mark David Chapman who was he the one who shot Reagan? Wanted to feel important, and whoever shot John Lennon, they want to feel important. I think what primarily drives people after their survival needs are met is the need to feel important.
Mm-hmm. And it always, I don't know. It takes me back to like I was at that guy Pinky's house, his estate sale, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And, you know, when you're gone and the people are like taking inventory of all the possessions that you had, and they're like going through everything that you valued, it kind of tells a story, you know, about who the hell you are. And, you know, are they going to be like inward pursuits? Is it going to be where you were just trying to like buy little pieces of the world or whatever?
No. We can't help but extend ourselves into the world beyond us. All right. The Ferrari becomes a part of us. If you have a Ferrari and you love a Ferrari, you love your Ferrari. It's an extension of you. We invest ourselves in our children, in our friends, in our possessions, in our teams, in our favorite personalities. That there is no alternative when you love but to invest yourself in something outside of yourself. So the things you buy, if you fall in love with them, they become extensions of you. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with primarily with media or advertising manipulation. When you love, you extend yourself into the world beyond yourself, and then any harm that comes to the objects and things that you love will be experienced as a direct attack on yourself.
Yeah, but it's the final score. I mean, the inventorying of his house is the final score of what he was gleefully pursuing, you know, through life. And is it going to be like masturbatory, hedonistic pleasures, you know, porn and the like, or is it going to be that he was trying to glorify something, you know, or he was trying to paint some pictures, or you know, that we all, especially you and me, Luke, there's going to be a time where our sunrise doesn't come, you know, and they'll be going through our shit. So I don't know, you could tell that really affected me with old Pinky when I saw everybody just like vultures. I saw way us going over his stuff, but I've had the time to kind of reflect on it. And I think it really says
affects you because you're afraid what you know, when it's all over for you, what significance will your life have had, and that tears you up inside. And so to bring calm to that painful feeling, you have developed a superstructure, just like I have, of what counts for meaning and purpose and righteousness in life.
Yeah, because I don't know, you know, I try to think like uber practical, and you know, leaving kids goals and houses, that's something, you know, that's something. But I told you, I have really thought back long and hard on that legacy thing, and I think it's overblown. Lucky for you, you don't really have those kind of considerations. But
I do. That's why I do a show. This is my legacy. I don't have kids. I have shows and blog posts.
But I haven't given up on you. I haven't given up on the fact that sometime between now and the time you're 80, you will have a young man, hopefully Luke Ford Jr., that will take the mantle, take the golden microphone, if you will, and take it on and beyond. And somehow he'll try some new tricks that you had never even thought of. You know what I'm saying? Not tricks, not gimmicks.
Yes.
Things that'll last.
Yes. No, I want that too. So
yeah, I want that for you. Let's leave it there. I appreciate
thanks,
you,
bro.
Luke.
Take care, man.
All right.
Okay. Good to talk to Kip. So what do you do to feel significant, right? What do you do to add meaning, purpose to your life? What do you do to make yourself the main character in your story? What do you do to feel heroic? So right now I am ignoring my wider, more mundane tasks to feel heroic, right? To feel important. I just want to put my obligations off to the side for a few hours. I did the responsible things with regard to them so that I could come on here and perform rituals of meaning and purpose. This is from today's morning meeting with Mark Halperin, Sean Spicer, Dan Turrentine, And here's a guest.
Bluntest question you've ever gotten. Does Kamala Harris have a drinking problem? And if so, when will we see public reporting about that?
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week. No, just kidding. All right, Sean, you can handle both of those. And then Dan, in whatever order you wish. Jeremy, thank you for the question.
How about this? You know what? In the interest of time, I'll take the RFK one. Dan takes the. So, Jeremy, if she were to run again, this is where a lot of things come out in a.
Whoops. Okay. Here we go.
Mark brought this up a couple times. That was Mark brought up the concern or the rumors about Donald Trump. That was the most, there are two rumors about Kamala Harris, both of a personal nature. Neither one of them broke through. And I am amazed about that. And I think because she has lost, unless she runs again, and if she were to run again, this is where a lot of things come out in a primary, where your opponents throw mud at you. They back channel opposition research. I have a feeling that both of those issues will come out if she were to run again for either governor of California or for president.
Dan.
No, Kamala Harris does not have, to my knowledge, and to people around her that I know, some of whom are spent 18 hours a day around her. No, she does not have a drinking problem. And I don't even remember your other. Oh, RFK. If he goes down, it's going to be not because of Democrats.
Okay, I'll be interested to find out more why it appears that Kamala has a drinking problem or a benzodiazepine problem. All right, let me feel good about myself by commenting or just simply sharing with you. See, I'll get a feeling of importance and as though I'm making a contribution if I simply share with you information that I've discovered through my reading, and then I can forget about my petty humiliations and setbacks of previous days. Right, so 2015 book here by Michael Cochin, 5 chapters on rhetoric, character, action, things, nothing, and art. Right, those are the 5 chapters. And so who is Michael Cochin? I'll just play a little excerpt. Here he is.
So now it's completely out of control. And but what happened was one way to put it is the right, some elements on the right had opposed this from the beginning, and a few elements in the center and left.
Okay, so you read Michael Cochin to your benefit. Here are some excerpts from his terrific book on rhetoric. So the speaker draws attention to himself when he claims to know things that other people do not, and when he takes responsibility for his advice, and therefore he puts himself at risk. So when I come on here to do a live stream, I am claiming to know things that other people do not. I am deliberately drawing attention to myself, and I have to take responsibility for the things that I say and how they put me at risk. So you'll notice that my show has become considerably less spicy than it was in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, into 2021, as the full extent and the ramifications and the contingencies and everything that can go wrong with anything that I say on here. So it's made me increasingly cautious because I do not want to end up, cited by some shooter like Luigi Magione. So I do everything that I can within reason to reduce the chances that something I say will have a negative effect on other people and therefore have a negative effect on me. At the same time, I keep speaking because I am wanting to draw attention to myself by making claims to know things that most other people or most other commentators do not. So I am risking that I will be treated according to the consequences of the collective actions that are attributed to my advice. That's what's going on. I would not have been able to put it into those exact words without reading this Michael Cochin book. So without a claim to imparting something special, right? I am just saying what anyone else would say, and I would recognize that there'd be absolutely no point in listening to me. So when I come on here, do a live stream, and claim that I got something to say, I am taking a risk that people will use what I say in a destructive fashion. So politics is risky. Live streaming is incredibly risky. Live streaming careers are frequently short. Political careers are frequently short because they're so damn risky. Right? Live streamers, podcasters, politicians are torn apart between this tension between having something special to say and at the same time sharing the general concerns of the audience to whom one says it. So to have any success as a public figure, whether as a podcaster, a pundit, or a politician, you have to simultaneously say, I am just like you, and I have something special to share with you. The normal person prefers, other things being equal, to have his interests represented by the educated and the suave and the successful, rather than the uneducated and inarticulate and unsuccessful. How do you control your reputation? Your reputation does not belong to you because your reputation exists in the minds of other people. So the most straightforward way of controlling your reputation and controlling public information about you is to control your conduct so that there is nothing discreditable to be reported. The more unique a politician's language, the more likely he is to lose. So the more a politician makes it about him, as LBJ did, and Richard Nixon did, and Gerald Ford did, and Jimmy Carter did, right, the more likely you are to lose. Ronald Reagan and FDR did not make it about themselves. They made it about their vision of America. The most successful public people, the most successful politicians, eagerly dehumanize themselves, right? They allow the markings of region, family, class, character, religion, all the personhood that they once possessed to be leached away. And they construct a new public self that does terrible damage to what remains of the genuine person. Right? This is particularly true of politicians, not so much true of podcasters and live streamers. In politics, policies count, but how do policies count in politics? They count as vehicles through which the candidate displays his person, his persona. Right? His policies count to the extent that they affect the public's image of the political persona. And how do we display our character? Through action, right? To show character, you show the actions that express the character. And the way that you show action is that you show the actions traces in the world and how it affects things. So I will stand up here and say, these shows are important because the other day a stranger ran into me on the street and he talked to me about how much the show had affected him and helped him to recognize that he had a marijuana addiction or an alcohol addiction, or he was an under-earner, or he had a problem with debting, and or he was sharing some of my insights with his therapy group and they were receiving acclaim, right? So I will come to you and I'll share these examples of how things that I say on this show like affects the wider world, and thereby I will make a claim that I am of good character. So remember Saddam Hussein in 1990 invaded Kuwait, and the Kuwaiti government in exile hired a premier public relations firm, Hill and Knowlton. And this firm counseled the Kuwaiti government in exile, don't talk in public about what the US government should do. Just talk about what the Iraqis are doing in Kuwait. So you will be more effective in your public presentations if you leave your demands and requests implied rather than stated. Right? Don't impose burdens and don't tell people what to do. Right? Make that implied. So how do you move people? You move them by presenting in words the things that move them. Right? If you aspire to seduce, right, you don't speak of your desire to seduce. You speak about that which is most likely to bring about the desire. So if you get into interactions with a woman that have no element of sexual and romantic intrigue, you're very likely to go straight to the friend zone. On the other hand, you don't want to talk explicitly about your desire to take her to bed. So you talk about things that are a little saucy, a little edgy, to preclude you getting relegated to the friend zone. Or I had one girlfriend who would tend to get excited when I put on REO Speedwagon's High Infidelity album. Right? I'd put on the album and I would hug her and I'd kiss her and I'd be nice to her and I would do the things that would bring about her sexual desire. So how do you inspire anger? Right? You present situations and things that make other people angry. How do you inspire pity? By presenting the things that are pitiable. So sympathy does not arise from the direct passion, right? It arises from the situation that excites the passion. Right? To know something, we must trust. And we tend to trust those who refrain from asking us to trust them, but instead invite us to judge for ourselves. Right? Trust me is a really bad claim. The most persuasive argument that you can make is the one that the audience cannot help but make in response to the things that you have presented. So if you simply present a hypothesis and then argue for the truth of that hypothesis, either the audience won't follow your argument or they'll see your argument right away and be bored with your presentation. So the most effective argumentation is to present new information and new anecdotes to your audience. Right? If you have a credible reputation, you will rely on your reputation to persuade people. But those who lack a reputation must have something unique to say, unique information and anecdotes. Right? Evidence in communication is a substitute for credibility. So in political elections, challengers will favor advertisements laden with policy content and factual assertion. Incumbents will tend to favor advertisements that focus on life stories and their records of achievement. So parliamentary majorities vote and they decide, and their backbenchers are supposed to stay quiet so that the work can be done. Parliamentary minorities, by contrast, talk, and in particular, they have to try to talk their way into power by being as specific and as concrete as possible, bringing new information and new anecdotes to the public. To state something clearly and unequivocally draws attention. But when you draw attention, you're taking the risk of being seen to get things wrong, and thus you are wrong, not just your statement, but you as a person are wrong and bad, and you're inviting ostracism and social punishment. People will tend to stay silent when their opinion is publicly unpopular. People tend to adjust their opinions to conform to what they see as the climate of opinion around them. And this spiral of silence thus favors the vocal, the activists, and those who have the favor of the media. If you want to belong to a group and you desire to be accepted in that group, so I'm a convert to Orthodox Judaism, and I want to be accepted within Orthodox Judaism. And so I have largely come to accept that group's outlook. And I will subconsciously and consciously conform the things I say and do to that group's opinions. My individual opinion, my individual behavior will be substantially affected by the opinions of those whose company I desire to keep or those whose company I desire to keep.
If I wasn't really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind. And that isn't condemnation. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I had no conscious participation. It's just my nature. Right. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? Have you ever been victimized by that delusion?
Oh, yeah.
Did you know it was a delusion?
No.
You know the nature of delusion. The nature of delusion is I lie to me and I don't know I'm lying.
Right.
So if you say I know I'm delusional, you're lying. Right? It's just not the nature of delusion. Right? Okay. Did you know that the idea that you can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world is a delusion? That you can be happiness and satisfaction in the world, but you can't wrestle with externals to produce it because the externals are simply reflecting what's going on within you. Does that make sense? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Have you ever been running around acting like you're in charge, and someone figured out you weren't in charge? In fact, they think they're in charge. And then you got this thing going on and no one's in charge. If you haven't, then, you know, volunteer for a committee around recovery. See what happens. Yeah? Okay.
So Hugh Hewitt is changing the time of his show. So he's going to be on in Dennis Prager's old time slot. So I wonder if he's going to be, they're both employed by Salem Communications. I wonder if Hugh Hewitt show will be taking over for most stations for the Dennis Prager
Glory
show.
America, bonjour, hi Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. Good morning to you. It is not long that I'll be able to say that to you anymore. I'll always say morning.
No, he's taking on noon to 3 on the West Coast, so he's not taking over the Dennis Prager time slot, but someone else is taking over the Dennis Prager time slot by Salem Communications. Why? Because Dennis Prager had a bad fall approximately 3 weeks ago, and everyone who knows what happened is not saying anything about it. And then they go public with how eager they are to share information and how much they value honesty and transparency. But there are contracts here, right? Salem can charge full price on the Dennis Prager show, even when they're substitute hosts. But once Salem admits that Dennis Prager will never be back or won't be back for months, they immediately lose money. They lose affiliates. They lose advertising dollars. And so it really doesn't matter how much Dennis Prager and his supporters value honesty and transparency. We're talking contracts here. We're talking big money, and they have to abide by lawyers' directions, right? When you replace a show, right, here's the problem. You have affiliates that have signed contracts for that show. Scheduling guest hosts does not change the contracts, but if Salem completely replaces the show, the affiliate contracts become void. It's easier just to have guest hosts. And the guest hosts will work with Dennis Prager's team, and so Dennis Prager's team won't be thrown out of work. So you're very unlikely to say anything if that is going to cost you your livelihood. Now, a friend of mine says, I guess Dennis Prager fans don't know the meaning of the words open and transparent. If Prager and Julie Hartman wanted to be transparent, someone would explain, 1, the circumstances under which Dennis Prager hurt his back and neck. Was he drunk? Was he under the influence of medication? Was he sleepy? Did he fall when he got out of bed in the middle of the night and had to urinate? Where did he fall? The most dangerous room to fall in is the bathroom, followed by the kitchen because of the hard surfaces. Was he knocked unconscious by the fall? Could he get up? Was he immediately transported to the hospital? Next stage in honesty and transparency is the diagnosis. What did the physicians who examined him find? What tests did they run? What did they learn? How long was he hospitalized before they did surgery? I believe they did surgery the same day. Was surgery laid out to Dennis as his best option for treatment? What surgery was performed? What was his prognosis before surgery and after surgery? What point did the doctors realize he developed pneumonia? What sort of pneumonia was diagnosed? What was his pneumonia? How was the prognosis changed? What has been the treatment? How successful has the treatment been? What is his prognosis today? Instead, we have nothing substantive, possibly to hide his condition from Salem, his employer, as well as advertisers and affiliates. Okay, let's check out the morning meeting, some of the highlights.
Outlet, but
little known fact, the founders envisioned that there'd basically be two paths in a wood. One would lead to being the Attorney General of the United States, and one would be being on a television network that almost no one's ever seen. That's how they saw it. Dan, what do you think, Matt Gaetz, OAN?
And he looks like the third Blues Brother in that promo. It does give him a perch to fire away.
I normally don't make predictions. I'll make a prediction. That show will never be on. That's my prediction.
Really?
That's my prediction. That show will never be on.
So
I might be wrong.
say by the end of January, there's not an episode.
I think something will come a cropper. Like I think Trump will call him and say, "Dude, that is not worthy."
I'll take the bet. I'll take the bet.
All right. Let's bet an eggnog, unalcoholic eggnog. All right. Here's the thing. If you've never been on this program before, let's do a little, what do we call housekeeping, refresher? I don't know what it's called. This program is based on the network news morning meetings at the big networks, your ABCs, your CNNs, your NBCs. Every morning at about this time, they convene by conference call and or audio only usually, maybe they're video now, I don't even know. And they talk about what's happening that day and then they kick it around. What does it all mean? The surprise twist here, the little O. Henry ending is we take your questions. So you can ask about whatever you first. When you think about Trump and Biden and Syria, we saw Donald Trump's Truth Social post saying don't get involved there. Some are reading that as a message to Biden. Do their interests diverge in Syria? In other words, is the stuff Biden wants about Syria that Trump doesn't want, or are they mostly in sync? John Spicer, I ask you.
They are not in sync is the answer.
What are the differences?
I mean, Trump's Truth Social is pretty transparent. He doesn't want to get involved. He has no desire to get in the middle of a quagmire there.
But Biden's not talking about sending U.S. troops on the ground.
No, but he wants to. But I think that he's a lot closer to getting involved than Trump would ever. So,
but what kind of involvement would you think the Biden team would like to have?
I think they'd like to have as little as possible, but it's on their watch, and this is where they got to be careful. That you've as we talked about yesterday, there are chemical weapons at stake. Israel is trying to shed all signs of their involvement. I mean, like there's a lot of implications, concerns about who they align with. So there's a lot of consequential things that are happening that Biden, by virtue of the fact that he is still president, has to deal with.
Dan.
And Trump has the ability to just be the guy who just doesn't have to. I mean, when you're not president, you don't have to answer the big stuff like this.
Dan.
Yeah, I think they are very similar in that neither wants a headache in the Middle East. Neither wants to have to address a vacuum with multiple players swirling around. Where they may differ too is I think the Biden administration is very worried about Russia trying to kind of maintain its influence, its strategic military presence there. I'm not sure Trump really cares about that. He doesn't want to have to deal with Putin on something like this. But I think they are very aligned. In that it is a problem. They both don't want Israel harmed. You've got, Iraq now may start teetering. And we talked yesterday about Turkey. So I think they are aligned. But if you're Trump, you don't want to have to deal with this to start your new administration.
Right. That's what, yeah. I mean, he does not. He wants Biden to handle this. So he walks in. It's one less thing on his plate.
What is ALTANF? What is ALTANF? AL-TANF. What is that? ALTANF. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Maybe I'm mispronouncing it. It's in a United States military base in Syria.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the small one. Yeah.
When did it start? How long have we had ALTANF?
Do we even, I don't technically, just to be clear, I'm not sure we technically acknowledge it. I'm just trying to,
Wikipedia knows that it exists.
Yeah, no, we do. It's been in the New York Times stories that we have a small, like couple hundred Marines or something there.
It's been there since 2016.
Yeah, during the Civil War, they yeah.
You think Donald Trump wants to pull up stakes like we did at Bagram? No, he wants to keep that thing, I bet. Anyway, I find that interesting. Anything else you guys want to say about Syria?
I mean, I think just for
No, go ahead.
I think just for the Biden legacy, I mean, it's brutal, right? I mean, he tried to get Israel to stop, and they've now gone after, Hezbollah and Hamas have been damaged. Now the Syrian government is toppled. For a guy who prides himself on, being the foreign affairs chairman for years and kind of being the master who was going to clean up the world from Donald Trump, it's a tough way to hand the baton back to Trump right now. He's been wrong more than he's been right in that region the last year.
I agree, Sean.
Sean, the ball's on the tee. Go ahead.
But I just think I go back to what we said a moment ago. I think Donald Trump wants to make sure that this is off his plate, or never gets on his plate, to probably be more exact, and that the more Biden can do. I'll be interested to see what they do today. John Kirby was out on some of the shows this morning, the national security spokesman /
So virtually no members of the blob, no members of America's foreign policy establishment praise Donald Trump. His foreign policy is described with contempt. On the other hand, virtually overwhelmingly, the blob and foreign policy commentators praise Joe Biden. They're impressed with the wording. They just love everything about Joe Biden's foreign policy, except Biden's foreign policy has been a monumental disaster, the biggest disaster of any American president's foreign policy. And yet it has consistently received rave reviews in the news media, while Donald Trump's far more successful foreign policy is overwhelmingly only treated with contempt. Why? Because Biden's team uses the correct words. They say the words, and they appear to be doing the things that receive praise, approbation, adulation from the foreign policy establishment. Right? They provide opportunities and a sense of importance and flattery to those foreign policy elites who comment on these matters, and so they receive adulation from our foreign policy establishment because they say the right words, they create the right conditions for the foreign policy establishment to feel important. And even though the policies have been a disaster for the world and for American interests, they still overwhelmingly receive praise. Well, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump's words and policies don't create opportunities for the members of the foreign policy establishment to feel important. They don't create opportunities for the foreign policy establishment to make money. They don't create opportunities for the foreign policy establishment to strut. And so the foreign policy establishment responds to Donald Trump with absolute contempt, even though the facts on the ground consistently show that Trump's foreign policy is far better both for the world than it is for America, than Joe Biden's.
With the incoming special hostage envoy for the Trump administration about that search. Trey, thank you for the latest. Appreciate it. Sandra?
Okay, John, dramatic pictures of a monster wildfire out of Southern California. Crews there working around the clock to put out the flames. Mandatory evacuations issued for those in nearby neighborhoods. The fire is raging close to Pepperdine University in Malibu, forcing classes to be canceled today. More than 2,000 acres have been scorched already. We're keeping an eye on that, and we'll have a live report a bit later in the show.
So the smarter you are, the more you live in an abstract world, and the smarter you are, particularly with verbal intelligence, the more likely you are to value words. And so people in America's foreign policy establishment, they largely live in an abstract world, and they particularly value words and policies and procedures that they're familiar with, and an outlook on the world that allows them to feel righteous and to feel important and to feel humane, and that accords with their hero system. And the reason that they praise Joe Biden is that he uses the words, the policies, the procedures that accord with their particular hero system, even though the results are just terrible.
Co-press secretary. I'll be interested to see what actions they take in the next 48 hours or so, because I think that's where this is going to matter. There was reports that HTS leaders were, I still don't understand who, but I'm obviously not read in enough, that are making calls to countries saying, hey, don't worry, we're in charge, we're good. I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
I think it strengthens Trump's hand in trying to make quick deals with Putin and Iran. And I predict, maybe, I'm not really predicting, I think he could make those off of this soon, which would be interesting. All right, Joe Biden and the economy. He's giving a speech at Brookings today. It seems to me to be, I can't imagine what metric of success his team thinks is going to be achieved.
This is
Okay, what's going on with Salem? Here we have a press release from Salem. How Mike Gallagher and Hugh Hewitt filled in on a cruise filled with Dennis Prager listeners. I told Hugh, we're going to be lucky if the Prager fans don't throw rotten tomatoes at us and make us walk the plank. They didn't. They were wonderful, kind, and understanding. Last month, Salem Radio Network host Dennis Prager suffered a severe injury and a fall that left him hospitalized. Little did Mike Gallagher and Hugh Hewitt knew that would lead to a change in plans in their Thanksgiving schedules. Prager was scheduled to lead a cruise comprised of his radio listeners on a 9-night cruise from Fort Lauderdale through the Southern Caribbean. Unfortunately, the date they could receive a refund for their cruise had already passed, locking them into the trip. That's when Salem Radio got creative, asking morning host Hugh Hewitt and midday host Mike Gallagher if they'd be interested in filling in for their injured colleague. Not everyone so excited. So Jerry says, government workers aren't the only ones not performing. The Dennis Prager cruise without Dennis Prager has been a bust. As the taxpayers are ripped off, so are Salem Media and Inspiration Travel customers. I'm glad to hear Dennis is doing better. I pray he makes a full recovery. Last night on the Rotterdam, Holland, America ship that was supposed to host the Dennis Prager cruise, not cheap, after Dennis was hurt, rather than offering a refund as I requested. Well, it was past the date where you could get a refund, so it doesn't make Salem and the travel line bad guys, but here's one unhappy customer. I was told, you don't have to go, but you're not getting a refund, even though we call it the Dennis Prager cruise. I have sat through bad substitutes. Hugh Hewitt, a complete swamp hack. He brushed off his old material and delivered it as though it was a Zoom call. He took no questions, never engaged the audience. He phoned it in. I asked one of the Inspiration Travel lackeys, zero customer support, if Hugh could discuss the Hunter Biden pardon. Nothing from the legal scholar. He stuck to his stale script. He left halfway through. Mike Gallagher is now on board. I've never been a fan. Yesterday, the point was reinforced. He played old videos I've seen on X and YouTube. The second day speaking was a review of his trips to Israel. Again, phoned in. A Zoom call would have had the same effect. I am trying to make the most of this situation. I am not a cruise person, so I'm working out and reading in my room. My motivation was to see Dennis Prager in person, a true savant and Bible scholar. The substitutes do not hold a candle. I have nothing good to say about Salem Media and Inspiration Travel. I hope they choke on the bags of money they made selling a Dennis Prager cruise and when he was hurt, not offering a refund. Insult to injury, shoving two clowns down our throats. Screw you, money-grabbing hacks. When Dennis recovers, Salem Media bums can tell him the big lie that the cruise participants were happy. I don't want to take a side here, just wanted to share the different perspectives.
I just,
to me, this is sad unless he overperforms my expectations. Go ahead, Sean. Say something with the word sad in it.
It is sad because he's going to try. This is going to be a revisionist history. He's going to talk about gas prices are falling. Don't worry, the economy is not as bad as you think it is. It's on the upswing. Here's a bunch of government statistics that tell you, despite what you feel, things are much better.
Well, and here's how I did it. Here's how Bidenomics works. I told you from the start we were going to grow it from the bottom down up, not the top down, from the inside out, not the outside in. And as my grandma used to say, God love him, or whatever.
This is literally his attempt to
so misguided. It's just so, as my son would say, it's cringe. Dan.
Well, look, I think this is what presidents do before they leave office. They try to put the best spin, which to some extent, I'm surprised he hasn't done more of this type of stuff as he gets ready to leave. Look, I think for Democrats and for Joe Biden, there is immense frustration on this issue. They are not wrong that they inherited an economy in really rough shape, right? Just COVID did that, whether it was Trump 2.0 or Joe Biden, things were bad, right? Joe Biden was there in 2009 when most Democrats think Obama did not do enough to get us out of the financial crisis. And so we had kind of 8 years of modest, tepid growth. And so they went big. And I think Biden very much believes that, in the fact that we are better than the rest of the world, we got out of it quicker, we're stronger. All of that said, right, to Sean's point, you can say all the statistics you want, but in people's guts, they don't feel like it's better. And inflation's been crushing. And they belittled it, or they tried to play it down. So I get it. They want to try to, accentuate things that they feel like they did well, reasons that history shouldn't be as harsh as it probably will be. But it does, appear like the stone's going to drop in the pond or the tree's going to fall and no one's going to hear it here.
I think the uniqueness of this that I think is fascinating from a political standpoint, if you're Biden, when you ran for re-election, in theory, you would have made this case, right? And you kind of allowed somebody else to do it for you. And like anybody else, you never think that they did it as good as you could have. They didn't articulate the nuances of your policies and the results of. And so this is Biden saying, like, look, she went out there and tried to sell it. I don't think she did as good of a job as I could have. I'm going to go out there now and recap for everyone kind of what they missed.
By the way, Sean, like, this should have happened in real time. Every time they put a point on the board, like Bill Clinton would have gone to swing states in 2021, in early 2022, saying, these are all the things I did. These are all the deliverables, town halls, media interviews. Instead, they were like completely, the guy couldn't do it. Like, he just physically could not perform.
Right.
And so you're right. It is just kind of comical that
I put a sharper point on what I was trying to say before. He is not good at explaining a theory of the case about the economy. He never has been. He was chair of foreign relations and judiciary. He doesn't do the economy really. He thinks he does. And so today he's going to go out and try again to do something he failed to do. He even failed to do when he ran for president and won. I will say a lesson, though, that I draw from this administration, which is something I've seen in every administration I've covered. Whether your president is good at explaining the economy or not, like Bill Clinton was good, Ronald Reagan was good, you need a commander-in-chief on the economy, because the president can't be the daily commander-in-chief. And that commander-in-chief needs to have credibility on Wall Street, credibility with CEOs, and ability to explain to real people the economy, okay? Janet Yellen and the 2 or 3 people who've been head of the National Economic Council, as Grandma Biden would say, God love them, but they are not that. Janet Yellen is not that. She has been.
So great news this week. Daniel Penny was found not guilty. Great news this week. Matt Gaetz is getting a show on OAN. I think he'll be a terrific. I think he might be a terrific talk show host. He seems to have those skills. All right. Here we've got Black Lives Matter co-founder Hawk Newsome calling for black vigilantes to hunt down and kill white New Yorkers after the Daniel Penny acquittal.
Just like everybody else has vigilantes, we need some black vigilantes.
That's right.
People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us?
Right.
I'm tired.
Tired.
I know you're looking for us to be like, oh, go and march. Go and march. No. This weekend, I want you to hold a community event everywhere from the Bronx to Houston to Seattle to Florida. Black people, whole community event, and talk about what you need. Just like everybody.
So after 9/11, the major networks and major newspapers, major news media organizations all received pleas and instructions from the George Bush administration to not interview members of Al-Qaeda, not to publicize anything that Al-Qaeda says, because the theory was that it would lead to future terrorist attacks, that if you play anything from Al-Qaeda, right, it could contain a message instigating a new attack. And so Americans were not given the ability to understand why Al-Qaeda attacked on September 11. And if you read the message from Osama bin Laden, why he carried out the 9/11 attack, and use a little bit of empathy for his point of view, you can understand, right, the thinking behind the attack. And so that was a gross dereliction of duty by the news media to not share and to not quote in any depth and sophistication Osama bin Laden's reasons for the 9/11 attack, and to not allow the perspective of Al-Qaeda to be openly shared and quoted on the news. Right? We should understand where people are coming from. And yes, free speech comes with some downsides. But if you listen to that Black Lives Matter activist there, he's essentially calling for the murder of white people. He's calling for black vigilantes to hunt down and kill white New Yorkers. And think about the extent to which the news media promoted Black Lives Matter in 2014 and 2020. They were egging on and instigating a lot of murders and destruction in the United States. So considerations of harm reduction are important, but they will immediately come up against free speech. So the more you care about harm reduction, right, the less you'll care about free speech. The more you care about free speech, the less importance you'll give to harm reduction. So I'm not in the middle I will generally lean more towards free speech than harm reduction. Here I stand. I can do no other. So help me God.
AWOL on, a public face on the economy the whole time. She wasn't chosen for that role. It's a huge mistake. And one of the things I think you're going to see with this incoming administration is they've got in Scott Bessent someone who is very comfortable talking to CEOs and Wall Street and the public about the economy. And Trump himself can do it, as well. But if you say, what were the failures of the Biden administration? They had no commander in chief on the economy. And particularly when you're coming out of a pandemic, particularly when you're dealing with rampant inflation, you need someone on TV every day saying, here's what we're doing. Here's what we've got going on. Here's how we're going to fix it. We got this under control. And the notion that Janet Yellen did that for 40 seconds over 4 years is bullocks. Sean.
But you think about it, I just mentioned Kirby. He goes out there on a daily basis.
He's great.
Press secretaries the briefing, talks about national security, foreign policy. And to Dan's point, the one thing that people care about the most is their own wallet, their own well-being. How's their family doing? Can they pay the bills? I honestly, if you had said to me 2 seconds ago, quick quiz, who's the Treasury Secretary? I don't. I mean, here's
a tougher quiz. It's not been 4 years yet, so it's something short of 4 years. Name anything Janet Yellen has said memorable about the economy in 4 years.
Inflation is transitory.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
There you go.
The only thing you can remember is the stupid things.
Okay, who have been the head of the National Economic Council? Go.
Exactly.
Who has it been?
Dan,
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Some guy whose name I can't remember, who's very good, and what's her name, who's in the job now, but you can't name that, let alone anything memorable.
What was it, Brian Deese?
Brian Deese. It was Brian Deese, and then what's her name's there now? I can't remember her name. My point is, you need a commander-in-chief on the economy, even when things are going well. You need somebody like Bob Rubin, who when they're on TV, people who care about the economy say, turn up the audio. That's Bob Rubin. I want to know what he's got to say because he knows a lot about the.
So ostensibly, the reason I'm doing a live stream at this length and at this particular time and day is because I believe I have valuable insights to share on this Luigi Magione guy. So let's see if I can provide some ballast for my ostensible reason for live streaming. This is the New York Times.
Suspect in C.E.O. killing withdrew from a life of privilege and promise. This article is by Corey Kilgannon, Mike Baker, Luke Broadwater, and Sean Hubler, and read by an automated voice. Luigi Magione, the online version of him, was an Ivy League tech enthusiast who flaunted his tanned, chiseled looks in beach photos and party pictures with blue blazer-red frat buddies. He was the valedictorian of a prestigious Baltimore prep school who earned bachelor's and master's degrees at the University of Pennsylvania and served as a head counselor at a pre-college program at Stanford University. With his credentials and connections, he could have ended up one day as an entrepreneur or the chief executive of one of his family's thriving businesses. Instead, investigators suspect he took a different path. The police now believe that Mr. Magione, 26, is the masked gunman who calmly took out a pistol equipped with a suppressor on a Midtown Manhattan street last week and assassinated Brian Thompson, the chief executive of United Healthcare. He was arrested in Altoona, PA. On Monday, after an employee at a McDonald's recognized him and called the police, officers said they found him with fake identification, a weapon similar to the one seen in video of the killing, and a manifesto decrying the healthcare industry. Later on Monday, Mr. Magione was charged in Manhattan with murder, along with additional counts of forgery and illegal weapons possession. And in the hours after his apprehension, his baffling journey from star student to murder suspect began to come into focus. Mr. Magione was in regular contact with friends and family until about 6 months ago when he suddenly and inexplicably stopped communicating with them. He had been suffering from a painful back injury, friends said, and then went dark, prompting anxious inquiries from relatives to his friends. Had anyone heard from him? In July, one man tagged a social media account that appeared to belong to Mr. Magione and said that he hadn't heard from him in months. "You made commitments to me for my wedding, and if you can't honor them, I need to know so I can plan accordingly," the man wrote in a now-deleted post. Those 6 months will most likely become a focus for investigators as they try to gather more evidence about Mr. Magione's connection to the killing and what he was doing in the time that no one could find him. Mr. Magione left behind a long series of postings about self-improvement, healthy eating, and technology, and a review of the Unabomber's.
Okay, the ostensible title, the literal title on this stream, if you listen to the whispers, you won't have to hear the screams. So, in part, that's inspired by my own painful realization of my tendency to react to any setback by isolating. And it's also inspired in part by, for months now, I have a tight right hamstring. I don't have a tight left hamstring. I just have a tight right hamstring. And so there's a dysfunction going on. I just finally looked up the problem, right? So I've been living with this problem for months, trying to figure it out and solve it on my own. And nothing that I've done has been adequate to this problem. So I finally, during that disastrous Cowboys-Bengals game last night, I looked it up online, tried to understand what the heck is going on, and I did some procedures that were recommended in various YouTube videos, and yeah, what the heck is going on, right? I need to adjust this problem. Right now, it's only a whisper. I just have, for months, a tighter, heavier right hamstring, and my left hamstring is just fine. This is a whisper, right? There's something wrong that I need to address, or this problem will persist and I won't be functioning at my best, and it may very well get worse and result in back pain. Yeah, what about that Alexander technique? So the Alexander technique helps you notice your habits and to start to let go of habits that are not serving you. But it's not a magic pill. It's not a cure to all physical ailments. It's a useful technique. And there may well be dozens of Alexander technique teachers in the world who would have insights into what's ailing me, and I could benefit from those. But what the heck? What the heck is going on here? And even with the Alexander technique, I still found about one time a year for about 2 days at a time, my lower back would go out on me and I would essentially be immobilized. And then when this happened to me, I think around in December of 2018, I started getting lessons in positional release, aka counter strain therapy, and haven't really had this problem since then. I've learned techniques for dealing with it. I had to go above and beyond my Alexander technique to solve it. And so it's a bit like that story where you drop your car keys at night and you only look for them right under the street light, even though that's not where you drop them, but you go to where the light is, right? You go to that which is familiar to you, right? You have to humble yourself to seek outside therapies from your own specialty. So pain can drive you crazy, particularly if you don't deal with it when it's just in the whispers stage.
Manifesto. Bullet casings left at the scene, scrawled with words like deny and delay, left the authorities and the public wondering if the shooting was payback for healthcare insurers rejecting claims. In the wake of the attack, social media seethed with resentment against the insurance industry, and the unidentified suspect became, to some, a folk hero. Mr. Magione came from a privileged upbringing, part of an influential real estate family in the Baltimore area.
Right, so when I put this into Google, one-sided hamstring tightness, the AI overview says can be caused by a number of things, including back or pelvic issues, local hamstring issues, a tear or scar tissue in the hamstring, sciatic nerve involvement. Yeah, so I did some exercises that seemed to rule out the sciatic nerve thing. Poor posture. Right? I may inadvertently be putting more weight on my right leg than my left. So I don't only have a tight right hamstring, I've also got some interior pelvic tilt on my right side. So here are things that you can do, various stretches and strengthening exercises, and see a physical therapist. So it's often the result of previous injury, sciatic nerve tension, lower back dysfunction, or immobility of the hip joint. Solutions usually run to strengthening and mobilizing effective tissues, correcting structural issues, and eliminating faulty movements of the hip and back. So I need to deal with this. I just let it go on and on. It likely makes one leg a little shorter than the other. And the nervous system works in a way that keeps your eyes level. And so if I got anterior pelvic tilt, then my back has to wrench somewhat to keep my eyes level, but that's going to cause some dysfunction in my lower back. So often, if you notice, you've got one leg longer than the other. Doesn't usually mean that leg bones are of different lengths. It's usually a functional leg discrepancy. Leg length discrepancy usually means that you've got anterior pelvic tilt. Wow, there's a whole Reddit thread. Right hamstring much tighter than the left. Okay, so damn, I've got to do something about this, so I don't become a danger to myself and others.
His grandfather, Nick Magione Sr., and grandmother, Mary C. Magione, purchased the Turf Valley Country Club in Ellicott City, Maryland, in the 1970s and developed the golf course community. In the 1980s, the family purchased Hayfields Country Club in Hunt Valley, MD. It also founded the nursing home company Lorien Health Services, and Mr. Mangione's father, Louis Magione, became an owner. The family also owned the radio station WCBM, which airs politically conservative programs and has other real estate holdings. A cousin, Nino Magione, is an elected member of the Maryland House of Delegates. The family's wealth and work with charity made it well known in Baltimore. Luigi Magione was just the last person you would suspect, said Thomas J. Moronic Jr., a lawyer and radio host who knows several members of the Magione family. It is just such a well-respected family and such a prominent family with...
So one of the books this bloke was reading was a book that I loved. It's called Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry and Getting on the Road to Recovery. So as we get older, we tend to get more entrenched in our habits, including our habits of unnecessary tension and compression, which leads to more and more of our muscles becoming short and tight and in spasm, which invariably pulls our bone structures out of alignment, thus curtailing our flexibility and our options in life. And it will get to where you can't sit down for long, you can't reach into the back of the fridge, you can't pick your sock off the floor. I remember I had one beloved professor whose back went out when he reached down to pick up a sock from the floor. And then as your life becomes more and more narrow and constrained, you'll be more and more incentivized to escape your pain and immobility through the use of actual narcotics or procedures and practices and pursuits that have a narcotic effect on you, but tend to be pretty bad for you. And this voice is annoying. You're referring to the automated voice at the New York Times. Okay. So most people in this situation will do nothing, but then other people will turn to chiropractors. And some of my friends are chiropractors, and chiropractors will tell their patients that long-term treatment is essential, and they'll offer packages, 10 sessions, 20 sessions at a discount. Now, when chiropractors and therapists tell you that long-term treatment is essential, do they have a self-interest there? Yes, they do. Do they allow their own self-interest to outweigh your interest? Sometimes they do. All right, when an attorney tells you that he's putting your interests first, right, is that true? Does he always put your interest first? When a doctor pledges to do no harm and to put your interests first, does the doctor always put your interests first? Does your accountant always put your interests first? Obviously, members of professions, like other people, are human beings who have considerable incentives to be central. The bottom line with chiropractors is there's no evidence that ongoing chiropractic care of back pain or any other symptom or disorder is effective. Right? The only evidence for chiropractic effectiveness in the treatment of back pain is when the pain is very recent. Now, until you go to a chiropractor, you probably never hear of a subluxation. Right? They're not identifiable in x-rays. They're not identifiable in hands-on examination. They are not identifiable in any objective method. right? The often given chiropractic premise that spinal joints can freely slip into and out of position is false. These dislocations do occur, but only in the event of serious trauma, the kind that takes you to the emergency room rather than to the chiropractor. Even when presented with identical copies of a patient's x-rays, a group of experienced chiropractors can reach no consensus on where in the spine the subluxations occur or what the proper course of treatment should be. If you go to see an Alexander Technique teacher, you're not going to want to ask for your x-rays or your radiographic studies, right? They don't ask for that because the Alexander Technique is an educational technique where people learn about their habits, and it's not based on treatment. So I just changed a bunch of emails with someone who's been in my life only online for about 15 years. And this morning's header, remember this morning at 6:24 a.m. when he sent me the email, I was feeling a little bit frustrated. Like I was wide awake at 4:40 a.m. and I tried to stay in bed, but I just thought of all these things I need to do. And I want to get into action to distract from feeling crappy, feeling like a loser. And so I get an email with the header, Alexander Technique, from someone I know. And it's like, oh, good, here's a distraction. He says, you have become a medical missionary. I appreciate that. I've had lots of trouble with back pain through the years. Neck problems confirmed by x-ray. My back pain was largely caused by muscle spasms, which continually pulled my spine out of place, even with chiropractic adjustments, right? The chiropractor will come in, they'll pop your bones back into place, but then the muscles will pull the bones out of place again and again and again. It is frustrating when doctors repeatedly tell you there's nothing wrong with your back while you, the patient, is experiencing debilitating pain. So I would go to Kaiser at times because I was having physical pain, and they'd say, there's nothing you can do, just take some aspirin, and in a few years you might need a hip replacement. Well, there was something I could do. I could go to a great physical therapist. You know, your physical therapist is potentially great when they do not take insurance. With very few exceptions, physical therapists who take insurance are not great. And my correspondent, who came from a Seventh-day Adventist background like I did, says, unfortunately, I'd been misled by an SDA physician writing that acupuncture was of the devil. Consequently, I avoided it. Ultimately, I tried it and I achieved miraculous results. So when I went through Kaiser, they offered no, at least in the initial medical consultation, no help for my elbow pain. And then I went and got acupuncture, and with about 4 or 5 sessions of acupuncture, the pain went away. And at a later date, when I had elbow pain or foot pain or some other physical pain, I could go to this great physical therapist I knew in downtown LA, and usually in one session, the pain would be removed. And my correspondent says, ultimately, I tried acupuncture and achieved miraculous results. I suffered for years because I was dumb enough to believe the Adventist doctor. And then I took classes, he says, at this acupuncture college where often you would get to take acupuncture sessions at a considerably discounted rate because you had students who were learning acupuncture. And he says, oddly, the president of this acupuncture college, where I also went for the discounted lessons, he told us that Chinese medicine doesn't really work, but it gives the patient a chance to talk about their illness. So sometimes when I'd go to my acupuncture sessions, I was feeling particularly unloved and lonely and just desperately in need of nurturing and someone to show that they cared about me. And so therapy and acupuncture and chiropractic, it's often been a way that I and millions of people purchase love, purchase caring. Not the ideal way to do it, but it's a lot of the reason people go to the doctor, right? To buy love, care, and concern. And so the head of this Chinese medicine college said, according to my correspondent, that it's not traditional Chinese medicine that works. It is the patient having an opportunity to talk about their illness. And then the same guy told us that adultery is okay. And so I left the school after that. And my friend says, I know Chinese medicine works, but adultery is bad. glad to hear about the Alexander technique. And he says that where he lives, he doesn't get a chance to talk about his problems. That there are massage places all around and herbal treatments all around, and the massage guy can pop my back into place, but then the muscles will continually pull it out of place because he's got unconscious and conscious habits of tension and compression that lead to the muscles tightening, shortening, and going into spasm, and then pulling bone structures out of place. So he says, the electricity that when he got electrical acupuncture, it stripped the muscles of their memory. It was caused, in my case, by too much Tai Chi. Says, I'm conscious of spending too much time looking at my computer screen. I do Tai Chi in moderation now. I read an interview in which Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones said he survived heroin addiction because he had high-quality drugs. I always knew when enough was enough. Knowing when enough is enough, that's wisdom. Okay, due to popular demand, here is more from the New York Times automated voice.
In Baltimore County, he said, Luigi Magione attended high school at the prestigious Gilman School in Baltimore.
And let's bring Elliott Blatt back onto the show. Bro, what's going down?
Oh, blessings, Luke. Can you hear me?
Blessings. Loud and clear.
All right. So what a day. What a week. What a week. What a week.
So much winning.
Winning. Assad out. Magione apprehended. Fuentes booked. It just keeps rolling. Which of these events do you think is most important?
The situation in Syria.
Yeah, I guess. One would.
What do you think?
I think the Magione case is the most important case.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, I don't condone anything he did, but I do like the fact that somebody is that the broken health insurance system is
yes.
You know? And so I hope the conversation can persist. I mean, insurance skeptics like myself are going to be tarred with the brush of Mangione's actions, but I just, as when I've had health insurance, I've been just so frustrated about not being able to get the things I want done, and then being forced to pay for it, and then when I actually do get something done, my contribution is still incredibly high. I don't perceive any benefit for having had insurance. And I think the fact that insurance is there is part of the reason why healthcare costs are so high, because they know that the healthcare companies are going to bargain them down anyway, the actual amount that they get paid. So they have to inflate their starting price, their beginning of the negotiation. So it's just not working.
So who do you think has a better healthcare system? North Korea? I'm joking.
No.
But you understand the point. It's difficult. Go ahead.
I don't doubt that it's difficult. But the incentives are always, there's nobody. Okay, so there's so many different parts of the problem. One is so many people eat like idiots that they just consume so much healthcare resource unnecessarily if they didn't eat like idiots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big part of my frustration, that there's just a lot of oafs walking around, eating this and that, whatever brightly colored package they see. They give themselves type 2 diabetes, and then they just completely absorb all of the, physician attention time that's out there, which is finite, right? And so that's part one. Part two is that it's made the practice of medicine really, really painful and unrewarding for doctors, So doctors, if they're bored and burnt out, they're not going to be giving you their best. If they're just treating the same old people with the same old problems, same old preventable problems, right? So there's just layer upon layer of malfeasance, bad practice, whatever. And it has to change. It's not sustainable as it is.
Okay, how much compassion do you have for people who eat Twinkies and trash on a regular basis?
None.
Okay, how much compassion do you have for yourself when you do things that you know are bad for you?
Infinite.
So how come you got so much compassion for yourself when you know that you're in, yeah.
Obviously there's a spectrum here, right? And it's one thing to treat yourself now and again, right? It's another to sort of day in, day out, eat like a retard. And there's a world of difference between the two, and the health outcomes associated with both are vastly different.
Right, but
So
you do things day in and day out that you know are bad for you, but you can't help it.
I know the risk I'm taking. Yes. I'm conscious of when I'm breaking the rules, my rules.
No, but I mean, I don't want to hammer on this too much and be a pain, but you know what it's like to be in a self-destructive cycle. And so I'm curious, do you really have genuine compassion for yourself?
I don't think it's society. I don't think the rest of the society needs to pay for my self-destructive behaviors. That's a difference, right? I own my problems. I realize the rest that I'm taking by living, by living the way I live. And, part of my reason, obviously it behooves everybody to take care of their health, but part of that calculus needs to be, you need to be aware of the burden that you're placing upon others by not maintaining your health.
So how much are you displacing your own self-loathing onto loathing for other people?
I don't have any self-loathing, Luke.
Seriously, you don't have any self-loathing?
No.
You're not conscious of engaging in repetitive, destructive behaviors every single day that you wish that you could quit? And you feel fine about that?
I don't have any. All right. Yeah, I have a few drinks in the evening.
Okay. So you should have compassion for. I would hope that you don't hate yourself for that.
I don't hate myself for that, but I'm not going to give myself any awards either.
Right. So what do you think the chances that you're displacing the negative feelings you have about yourself and doing things that you know you shouldn't do onto others?
You had just brought up the issue of acupuncture. You got some acupuncture treatments.
Mm-hmm.
You're not clear whether or not they worked or not, but
no, they definitely worked. They definitely worked for me.
All right, I can't have health insurance cover acupuncture treatments. The last time I checked, maybe things have changed, but if I want acupuncture treatments, which is something I would like to avail myself of, I can't do it through my insurance. It's like, I would rather allocate money. I'm forced by the state to allocate my healthcare dollars towards insurance companies rather than what I'd rather have, which is acupuncture treatment.
And more importantly, you'd rather have Alexander Technique lessons, and yet health insurance companies are unlikely to cover the cost of your Alexander Technique lessons.
That's right, bro.
That's outrageous.
It's outrageous. It's unbelievable. So anyway, I don't think what I'm saying is terribly depending on certain cultures, what I'm saying would just be very natural and it wouldn't seem extreme in any regard. And you seem to be taking them as if they are extreme.
No, I'm not taking them as extreme. I'm going beyond what's easy, right? It's easy for me to say, I love having sex with a beautiful woman. What is painful for me to say is when I have sex with a beautiful woman, it quiets down that part of me that thinks I'm a piece of shit.
Luke, it's easy to grin when your ship comes in and you've got the stock market beat. But the man who's worthwhile is the man who can smile when his pants are too tight in the seat.
That's amazing.
I don't know. I didn't know why I called in, Luke. I just felt like you were.
But do you know of any country in the world where you think, oh man, this is a much better system?
I'd imagine most of Europe has got it figured out better than we have. Yeah.
Because they get to free ride on our innovations, right? They innovate almost nothing. And so they get to use pharmaceuticals and other medical innovations that we develop in the United States and that we pay for. Americans pay about 4 times more for pharmaceuticals than people in Canada and Europe because the rest of the world free rides on the medical innovation in America.
Just kind of like NATO.
Yes.
You know? The burden we bear for the best of the world, you know, and still we're hated, Luke. Still
right.
We're hated.
And do you think that I would suspect you have paid far more in taxes than you have received in government services?
By a large margin, yes.
And how does that make you feel?
Irate, Luke. Makes me spitting mad. How about you?
I would
just like to get a little something. You know what I mean?
A little something to make you feel better.
Couldn't I just go get an acupuncture treatment once in a while and have all of that tax money that I've paid just pick up the cost, you know?
How much of your desire for acupuncture treatment is a desire to purchase love?
None.
You don't feel any need for someone to appear to care about you and to nurture you?
No, when I'm in those situations, I feel like I feel embarrassed for having to take someone else's time with my problem. I don't enjoy the attention of others. When they look at me being concerned, I have to think, are they really concerned, or is this just their game face? You know,
I love the attention of others. You probably didn't realize that about me. Like, it's a high for me to be taken care of. It's like the greatest thing. Like, I have fantasies of other people just taking care of me.
I think most people are like that. I think like women go to nail salons for the exact same reason. You know, it's not that they really care about their nails, but they like somebody tending to them.
Hey, when you have some setbacks, how do you restore your sense of agency and that you can be effective in your life after you have like a series of humiliations? How do you restore yourself? Like I do a live stream. What do you do?
I make myself about 4 or 5 drinks and then take a nap and wake up. Then I wake up and it's the problems. I feel better.
Okay. Anything else?
Maybe a little deep breathing, maybe a little walk. I don't know. That's about it.
Do you ever imagine that you have a bigger penis?
Always.
I sometimes think about that. Like, imagine like
Magione. Apparently, he's like hung like a donkey. Apparently,
I didn't realize that, but I mean, I was crazy about this girl, and then I found out my friend had done her, and my friend let me know that he was really well hung, and so he had filled her up in a way that I never could.
It's hard to bear, isn't it?
So what do you think about the Iranian mullah regime falling? Do you think perhaps the Iranian regime might be the next to fall? You remember when communism fell in Eastern Europe and then in the Soviet Union? Maybe we're seeing a similar cycle right now in the Middle East.
I haven't been paying attention. Is that really a possibility? That seems like it would be earth-shattering.
So what podcasts have you been listening to? What YouTube videos have you been watching? How have you accounted for your spare time, sir?
Have you been applying yourself?
Yes. Are you doing everything you can to be an informed citizen?
I'm still listening to Richard Spencer for God knows what reason. He seems to.
He's so dramatic. He's a pleasure to listen to. Like, he's got a wonderful dramatic way of speaking. No?
Yeah, but he contradicts himself from week to week, you know? You
Right,
never
but
know
it
what
feels
version-
amazing to listen to it. Like you feel like you're getting the real stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
He's a narcotic, like Obama. It just has a narcotic effect.
Yeah, yeah. I'm feeling really disengaged from like politics and political conversation. More so than ever after the election. It seems like I barely care. I don't barely listen to Halpern anymore. I don't really care about the transition. I don't even remember even thinking about transition prior to this year. I don't even remember it being such a day-to-day fascination like it seems to me now. But now it's almost as, you know, we're supposed to believe it's as compelling as the election itself. Is personnel really policy, Luke?
Yeah, but what is it in listening to Richard Spencer that captures your attention? Is he talking about his new religion, or is it alt-right gossip? What is it?
Well, it's so he talks about religion. He doesn't really talk about his religion per se. He's doing a lot of analysis of the Bible and so forth, and his takes on it. And then some of them seems pretty interesting. Others seem completely wacky and out there. I can't even characterize like some of his takes on religion because they're so just weird to me. This Dionysian stuff and
oh yeah,
it just I don't even know how to. It's sort of like Duvid's multiple truth hypothesis. I just kind of go blank, you know.
But you keep listening. You keep listening, hoping for what? What's the money shot? What's the
Well,
payoff?
the thing is, yeah. So anybody that sort of goes out of their way to have a podcast with some big-brained ideas, you know, I respect that because you know it's nice to stretch your mind and think about things differently. So you want to expose, or at least I want to expose myself to new ideas, and I'm willing to give people, you know, some leeway to be wrong, you know.
Oh, and you've paid, right? You've joined his Patreon to get this,
right.
and so you figure I paid for this. I might as well listen to it, even though it's not meeting my needs.
Yeah, and like I just can't bring myself to pull the trigger and cancel. It just feels like a breakup, you know. And
did you ever
know,
see the 1971 film Carnal Knowledge?
No, I didn't.
Really? Okay, so there's
Is it
a Jack.
porno?
I'm sorry?
Is it a porno? It sounds like a porno.
God forbid. It's a 1971 American comedy drama directed by Mike Nichols and written by Jules Pfeiffer. And it stars Jack Nicholson, Candice Bergen, and Art Garfunkel. So I suggest you watch it. So anyway, there's two main blokes in it, played by Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel. And Jack Nicholson character has a lot of sex. And he wants to settle down, but every woman he meets has just got an inch too much here, an inch too little there. And finally, by the end of the movie, he has to resort to purchasing sex. And then he gets mad at the Asian hooker because she won't say the exact words he needs in the exact sequence so that he can get his rocks off. And so I'm just curious, like, what are the words? What does Richard need to do for you so that you are a satisfied customer of his podcast?
Well, you need to let rip a nice hail our people once in a while, you know. It's gotta go back to the original canon, you know, the first album, you know, the self-titled,
the greatest
album.
hits.
No, yeah, okay, yeah, greatest hits is good, but there's like some bands, you know, they release an album and the name of the album is simply the name of the band.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the self-titled album. Like Led Zeppelin, I think, did this, and the Pretenders did this. I don't know. It's habit, Luke. It's habit. And then I've been thinking about like, well, maybe it's just good to let your mind rest and not fill it with any ideas, and let the true you bubble out through all the intellectual static and noise that you create. So I've been going on these sort of what are they called? What's it called? Dopamine fasts. I've been sort of fasting. I've been limiting my dopamine intake.
And so what have you given up to do that?
A lot of podcasts, a lot of sort of compulsive podcast listening.
Okay. What else?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, there's not much dopamine left in my life. I live a couple notches. I live a couple notches above boredom.
How's your business?
Do you ever see The Long Goodbye? The Long Goodbye. I'll tell the business. You want to talk about the business?
No, tell me about The Long Goodbye. I think I saw the first hour.
Yeah, it was like, and I just sort of I liked it. There's something about the pacing and the style of the movie. I liked it, and because it didn't quite fit the the normal Hollywood formula. So like when you brought up the Carnal Knowledge movie, there's like the 70s. It just seemed like things were a bit more experimental. They didn't have to be so formulaic. Everything wasn't optimized for revenue like they are today. And that was an example. There's this long scene and it starts where his cat is bothering him and he has to sort of get out of bed and stroll across town to buy more cat food. And this takes like 10 minutes, and that sort of hooks you into the plot, this journey to go buy cat food. And it's really unfolds very slowly, and it's just, I don't know. I just, I'm nostalgic for movies like that have a certain idiosyncratic take on things. I don't want to turn this into another like Richard Spencer art reviews type of thing, film review program, bro. But let's talk about the book business, bro. You want to invest?
How's it going?
It's going really well. But I might have bitten off more than I can chew. So that's my current state of things. So I've been selling these comic books. I told you about this, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what
So
people are
you
reading.
got to carry the show for a minute. The audience
Okay.
demands that I clean my mic, so I'm going to turn off my mic while you carry us away.
All right. So I'll give you the deep backstory. So anyway, I bought a couple of collections of Marvel and DC Comics graphic novels, they're called, which are basically comic books with a semi-hard backing. And people buy these things like they're going out of style. And so I was able to pick up a small stack of dough doing this. And then I decided to really jump in with both feet. And I bought a huge collection of books in Oregon, like 3,000 plus books. And this is a lot of books. And it just takes an incredible amount of time to sort through that many books and stack them. Then you have to create a filing system so that you can retrieve the books when they ultimately sell. And then to do this, you need to be always hefting boxes of books from one place to another. And so this is actually a fair amount of isometric exercise. So I've been getting a lot of exercise doing this, but then I am absolutely bedridden the next day. Like, I did a proper day of manual labor this past Friday, and I was bedridden all of Saturday. And I just hadn't bargained for such a quick, steep decline in my health or my physical endurance. How have you been navigating your physical decline, Luke?
Well, whenever I have a symptom come up, usually I research it and deal with it. So I rarely have physical pain. But I have to have like at least one rest day a week where I don't engage in more than, say, 2 miles of walking. But usually I work out with weights, pull-ups, push-ups every other day. And so I'll have at least 1, sometimes 2 rest days. And then I typically average probably 6 miles or so of walking and or stationary bike riding a day. But I've had this low-key nagging tightness in my right hamstring that I haven't addressed for months now. So it's time I stop lollygagging around and look at YouTube videos and find the exercises to deal with this thing.
That's interesting. I'm thinking about getting a weight bench and doing some bench pressing. Would you recommend this or not recommend this?
Well, it depends on the technique that you use. if you use technique for exercise that does you more damage than the exercise does you good, then I wouldn't recommend it, right? Often people will go do yoga, go do weightlifting, and their technique will do them far more harm than benefit because they are exacerbating tendencies to tighten and compress that then are not fully released afterwards. And so the exercise and the exertion ends up doing them more harm than good.
Well, what I'm trying to do is my thought is that if I do bench pressing, it will sort of strengthen and broaden my shoulders, which would keep me from slouching, right? It would keep my posture more upright, and it would allow my lungs to fully expand. So I'm not really in it for the the muscle strength so much as like the posture correction.
Right, but if you work out, it's not guaranteed to broaden your muscles, your shoulders. It may compress them because when you're lifting weights, you might be compressing, tightening, and shortening your muscles, and you might be making tighter these patterns of unnecessary tension and compression. So in and of itself, working out your shoulders will either have, working out with weights will either have at best a neutral effect or most likely a negative effect on your posture because you'll be ingraining your habits and just making them deeper and tighter.
Well, right, but so I have a tendency to curl and hunch forward, and so like the bench pressing forces you to lift weights, which is the opposite of that action, right? It's a opening and opening and widening.
You got a smartphone, right? So you can videotape yourself doing this. Then you can watch back the video to see if you're tightening and pressing or opening and widening.
Okay. All right. But you have nothing against isometric exercise in general, as long as it's done properly.
Yeah. It all depends on how you do it, right? Anything you do, like some people becoming more religious will be bad for them. Some people doing isometric exercises, the way they do it will cause them more harm than good. So it's not like there's any one thing you can usually do that is automatically good. It all depends on how you do it.
Well, I'm just going by the times that I remember when I've done bench pressing, I felt really good afterwards. That's my only.
Yeah, initially. That's how it is for almost everyone. When they initially start working out, they get an adrenaline rush, a dopamine rush, and they feel good initially. But then if they're doing it in a negative fashion, they will start getting injured and having problems. So it's harder to sustain that positive rush for weeks and months on end. But what's your experience?
Well, I felt good, and I realized that there's a certain, chemical effect, this adrenaline and so forth. But beyond that,
for how long do you get that good feeling? For how many months?
Well, like a half an hour after a session.
No, but for how many months you're still getting that high after a session?
Oh, I've never been able to keep a stretch going that long.
What about a plank? How long can you do a plank for?
Oh, I haven't tried in a while. That sounds grim.
Oh, please do and report back. It'd be curious.
Okay. Well, the thing is, when I do the bench press, not only did I was sort of mid sentence there when I was when I would do the bench pressing. I would feel good. You get that sort of adrenaline, but after the adrenaline, it did feel as though I'd put my posture back together properly.
For how long?
Which didn't last for, I don't know, a day or two. It didn't last forever, but it just seems like this is a habit I need to pick up and stay with. Just doing lots of light reps with bench pressing. This is the hypothesis I'm working with, but I'm consulting a professional right now.
Yeah,
posture professional, and I appreciate your feedback.
So I want you to take video of it and then transmit it to me somehow, and we'll analyze it on the show.
Oh, that would be so fun. Oh, the mockery that would ensue.
No, God forbid. This is a very respectful audience. This is about human thriving, this show.
Oh, okay.
But maybe you'll develop more compassion for yourself, which will then extend outwards to other people.
I've got plenty of compassion for myself, bro. I've got more than All right. Well, I don't know if I have much more than that.
Okay, thanks, bro.
Okay.
Blessings.
All right, thanks. All right, blessings.
Take
All right.
care. Bye. Okay, let me get myself together here.
The economy. Instead, Janet Yellen, inflation is transitory, the end.
Right.
Disaster. All right. Pete Hegseth, in the great words of Arthur Fonzarelli, I was rude. But I wasn't rude at the time, because at the time he was dead. And I'm telling you, Trump thought he was dead. It wasn't like some fantasy or my sources tricking me or spinning me. He was dead. But he's been brought to life by an extraordinarily effective team of Sherpas who figured out a strategy. They basically good cop, bad cop with the senators. Good cop, we respect advise and consent. We want to hear you out, etc. Bad cop, if you cross President Trump on this nomination, you will be primaried and lose. Last night, once again, the nominee breaking the normal rules of advise and consent, where you don't do interviews until your confirmation hearings. Hegseth did another interview. He went on with Sean Hannity, and he talked about his vision, Donald Trump's vision of rooting woke out of the Pentagon. Let's go to the videotape.
Well, there's a lot to be done. First of all, you salute the commander-in-chief who got those 76 million votes and is going to chart the way. And I'll give him advice and counsel along the way. I'll just say what he told me. Return the Pentagon to the warfighters, Pete. Get in there and clean out all the social justice, politically correct garbage on top and get back to lethality, warfighting, accountability, meritocracy, and readiness. And guess what? 95% of the people in that building in the Pentagon and that wear the uniform, that's all they want to do anyway.
They've got MAGA fired up on this program. All of us, Sean, has been especially good at this, have deconstructed how they turned the message about this is not about Pete Hegseth's past. It's about the future of MAGA and the Pentagon. One of the issues that occurred yesterday after our program was he met again with Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst doesn't want to be the poster child of opposition. So even though she didn't endorse him yesterday, she put out a very clever statement about how she supports him in the process. She also basically can now have Christmas with some peace because she's being supportive and she's saying, let's get to the hearings. Those are in January. So her family won't be picketed by MAGA over the holidays. But there is one issue that came up, the question of women in combat, which was kind of addressed last night also on Sean Hannity, roll videotape.
And I also want an opportunity here to clarify comments that have been misconstrued that I somehow don't support women in the military. Some of our greatest warriors, our best warriors out there are women who serve, raise their right hand to defend this country.
Okay, looking at a tweet here from Lindy Man. Luigi, Daniel, Penny, Jordan Neely. What do they all have in common? None of them had jobs. You don't have a job, wild things can happen in your life, but once you get a job, that door closes. Comment, true. What if Daniel Penny had been at work, serving others or serving his community instead of choking an innocent black man to death? John Podhoretz tweets, actual headline in the print New York Times about Daniel Penny acquittal. In case you were wondering what a garbage newspaper is, New York Times, jury quits man who was choking rider on subway. Okay. Harsh commentary here. It claims that the dildo of consequences rarely arrives lube.
I genuinely did not know this, but cracker apparently is a slur used to oppress white people and silence them. Like, I had no idea that you guys were being called cracker, taffy, 8 Mile, albino, Betty, Crocker, cracker jack, dog fucker, egg, pasty, ghost, hick, hillbilly, Keebler, Mayflower, mayonnaise. Like, shit! Like, it's been used to oppress and silence you? Like, damn, I wish it worked. Shut the fuck up.
The job that I had worked really hard to get and meant a lot to me just called me and fired me because of everything.
Ouch. So, yes, the internet is a part of real life, and the things that you say on here will affect your real life. And it's incredibly risky to go public with your incisive perspectives on hot button controversial issues. Okay. So I want to forget about my own defeats at life and instead opine upon the Alexander technique. So thinking about a book which contains a section on the Alexander technique. Terrific book is called Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry, Getting on the Road to Recovery. Like most people, I assumed that chiropractic treatment was safe. most of the troubles that send patients to a chiropractor in the first place are included on the World Health Organization's list of contraindications to chiropractic adjustment. So if you have disc herniation, severe or painful disc pathology, leg pain, dislocation of a vertebra, presence of spinal hardware from fusion surgery, hypermobile joints, vertebral instability, inflammatory arthritis, osteoporosis, or a history of long-term glucocorticoid treatment, right, which can make bones fragile, especially in older people, you should not get chiropractic. So half of all chiropractic patients experience temporary adverse side effects after treatment, including pain, numbness, stiffness, dizziness, and headaches. These are minor in comparison with a more serious threat, the possibility that a cervical neck adjustment may result in a chiropractic stroke. Here's how that happens. The vertebral arteries are very dangerous to get your neck adjusted, which run roughly parallel to the cervical spine, make a sharp turn around the uppermost cervical vertebra just before those arteries travel into the brain. At the top cervical vertebra, they form a harmless kink until a chiropractor performs a tug and twist adjustment that violently rotates the neck. That movement can tear the delicate walls of one or more arteries, producing a blood clot or swelling that cuts off the blood supply to the brain. The resulting stroke may lead to permanent damage or death. So, quite dangerous to have a chiropractor adjust your neck. In 1963, after many years of seeking to contain chiropractic's expansion, the American Medical Association established the Committee on Quackery. The AMA asked physicians to lobby to end federal recognition of chiropractic. 5 years later, the U.S. Department of Health announced that chiropractors would have to adhere to the standards of modern medicine and stop discussing subluxations if they wanted to be allowed to continue to practice. Right? You'd think the government's antipathy would have checked chiropractic's popularity. But a few years later, under intense pressure from the Chiropractic Lobby Organization, or the various organizations, Congress ordered Medicare to pay for spinal manipulation. To be reimbursed by Medicare, the chiropractor needed to show that a subluxation existed on an X-ray. That should have imposed an impossible hurdle because, as we have established, subluxations are not visible on X-rays or in any form of imaging. But undeterred by that minor detail, chiropractors installed X-ray machines in their clinics, adopted the now standard practice of taking a complete series of spinal images and doing so repeatedly over the course of a treatment, thus exposing patients to unnecessary radiation. And financially, this was a boon, allowing chiropractors to collect payments for both X-rays and chiropractic adjustments. In 1990, the British Medical Journal described spinal manipulative therapy as 7% more effective than standard hospital physical therapy, without acknowledging that physical therapy was notoriously ineffective as a treatment for low back pain patients. Before the outcome was established, 3/4 of the chiropractic participants dropped out of the study. So saying that chiropractic was 7% better than an ineffective protocol was faint praise indeed. So the British Chiropractic Association ordered its members to take down their websites in self-preservation before their business and reputations were damaged. Within months, 1 in 4 British chiropractors was under investigation for profiteering, misleading marketing, and advertising excesses. In the United States, in light of this news, amid increased concerns that chiropractors were taking patients for a ride on the government's dime, Medicare altered its confusing stance. Instead of showing subluxations in an X-ray, then we'll pay for treatment, instead ordered chiropractors to restrict their Medicare billing to active therapy rather than maintenance services. So chiropractors altered the way they described their treatments so they could code every session as active therapy. In 2001, Medicare paid chiropractors $285 million for improperly billed and mostly unnecessary chiropractic services. Chiropractors have divided over philosophical issues. There are those who cling to the founders' metaphysical and non-scientific methods. They are known as straights. Others, called mixers, now acknowledge the existence of bacteria, viruses, and other scientific nuts and bolts, but still adhere to the crank founders' tenets. Though they call themselves chiropractic physicians and they employ the honorific doctor, practitioners who went to chiropractic college before 1974 may have gone directly from high school to practice after only 18 months of training. if you have a herniated disc, right, chiropractic treatment is contraindicated. Right, McKenzie method is far superior way for many people to deal with back pain. So it was developed by the late Robin McKenzie, physiotherapist who died in 2013. So he developed his technique by accident because he was occupied by another patient. He sent his next appointment, a patient who suffered from a disc herniation with associated back and leg pain, into a room to wait. Told him to lie on his stomach on the examination table, preparation for the standard ultrasound and heat therapy, which does you virtually no good. But it is still standard practice for physical therapists who bill insurance. Right? They all give you ultrasound and heat therapy, and it does you no good. Mackenzie did not know that his colleague who used that room last had left one end of the table elevated like the backrest of a chair at a 90-degree angle. Given the awkward configuration, the patient did his best, configuring his spine in an awkward back bend. Upon entering the room, Mackenzie was horrified till the patient explained that the pain had relented. Mackenzie realized he had placed the patient's spine in extension, thus eliminating the disc herniation's pressure on the spinal nerve root. But spinal extension did not always end acute pain. Depending on how the protruding disc made contact with the spinal nerve root, a forward bend put the spine in flexion could be just the ticket. When treatment was appropriately delivered, recovery from an acute episode could only take a few days. And then once a patient knew what worked, he could then rescue himself if he was in a crisis in the future. So physical therapists who bill insurance will usually use the same cookie cutter routine for most low back patients, ensuring that most will not get better. Right? Patients who fail physical therapy, right, which is often useless if the physical therapist bills insurance, right, they will then take that as evidence that they need surgery. Right? They don't recognize that typical cookie cutter physical therapy that bills insurance is usually a pseudo intervention. It's a holding tank for patients who are not ready to get on the gravy train of scans and tests and injections and surgery and pain management. So why is it necessary to get a physician's prescription for physical therapy? That's not required for chiropractic or massage or biofeedback or exercise. The answer lies in the hierarchical relationship between physicians and physical therapists. Physical therapists traditionally serve as support staff to doctors, right? Physician lobbying group don't want physical therapists to gain direct access to patients. If you talk to a physician over a few beers, he will tell you that if you go to an excellent PT to treat musculoskeletal condition, you'll not need drugs or imaging or surgery. You'll not need a surgeon. Therefore, physicians have a vested interest in keeping patients under their own care. Certified personal trainers often get their degrees after a weekend online course. In a 2015 review of the medical literature, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality found no evidence that epidural steroid injections were effective in treating symptoms of spinal stenosis or typical low back pain. Even in the presence of recent disc herniations and ensuing sciatica, the benefit of injections was small, and yet billions of dollars are spent on these useless epidural steroid injections.
Where he wrestled and played other sports and was the valedictorian of his graduating class in 2016. In a graduation speech, he described his class as coming up with new ideas and challenging the world around it. He thanked parents in attendance for sending him and his classmates to the school, which he described as far from a small financial investment. Tuition is currently $37,690 per year for high schoolers. Aaron Cranston, who became friends with Mr. Magione during their time at Gilman, said he recalled Mr. Magione as being particularly smart, perhaps the smartest at the elite private school. Even before college, Mr. Magione had already made a mobile app where users could fly a paper airplane through obstacles. Mr. Magione was social, friendly, and never particularly political, Mr. Cranston recalled. He was ambitious and carried his long interest in computer science toward college. He was a big believer in the power of technology to change the world, Mr. Cranston said. Freddie Leatherberry, 26, an accountant who lives in Catonsville, MD, graduated from Gilman with Mr. Magione in 2016. He recalled Mr. Magione playing soccer for the high school team and running track or cross country. Those are both such disciplined sports. It says a lot about who he was as a student, Mr.
So my parents didn't like it that I ran marathons when I was age 12 and would usually train about 40 plus miles a week. They were right. It was a bad thing to do for a young kid, but they thought that I would develop discipline, at least, from these exertions. And then I developed knee problems, and I had to quit long-distance running by 8th grade. So you're saying, 40, tell me more, read to me more from Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry and Getting on the Road to Recovery. So the author says that she'd heard from a dozen people in her life that the Alexander Technique had made a big difference for them. Among the well-known adherents of the Alexander Technique, Kenneth Brenner, William Hurt, Kevin Kline, Jeremy Irons, blah, blah, blah. And we have the British Medical Journal publishing the outcomes of a large randomized controlled trial showing the benefits of the Alexander Technique. After the paper describing the Alexander Technique studied in BMJ generated 67 disparaging comments, mostly from doctors. Few of them were even marginally polite. So when the NHS embraced the Alexander Technique as part of its revised guidelines and declined to allow epidural steroid jabs for most common lower back conditions, things got ugly. All right, this would, if the Alexander Technique works, if direct access to good physical therapy works, then physicians will lose out on billions and billions of dollars, and we don't want that, do we? Something else that works for back pain is the teachings of psychiatrist John Sarno. So Sarno treated people with pain, with back pain, and he came to see many of the causes as psychological, that there were psychological problems behind the unnecessary muscular tension. Right? Your muscles, your mind, your heart, and all your organs prepare to act, but you do nothing. You may wish to fight, you may wish to flee, but modern civilization prevents you from carrying out your natural impulses. You race your engines without going anywhere. So chronic muscle tension creates a cycle that generates more pain. And without sufficient exercise, oxygen-deprived muscles, it's no good for them, right? They generate all sorts of lactic acid that accumulates. So Sarno was not convinced that exercise would resolve back problems. He viewed back problems as manifestations of emotional turmoil. He was not psychoanalytically trained. He just attributed pent-up rage to an unruly subconscious process rather than a physiological one. He could convince a patient that his subconscious was kicking up a fuss to distract him from personal issues, that this fuss was manifested in reduced blood flow to postural muscles. The patient would relinquish the notion that something was structurally wrong and return to a functional life. And he called this condition tension myositis syndrome, or TMS. Found that the patients who had the most success with his approach were hardworking perfectionists, driven by self-imposed pressure that left them feeling stretched to the breaking point. They came from chaotic childhoods where they'd struggled to gain control over unpredictable and toxic environments. In 1998, he published The Mind-Body Prescription, Healing the Body, Healing the Pain. 2020 co-anchor John Stossel was in the midst of his own struggle with back pain. After John Stossel sat down with John Sarno for a chat, he realized that his back felt better for the first time in months. And they did a segment on 2020. John Sarno became America's back doctor, but there was a problem. John Sarno was bad for business. Right? The medical community hated him because once patients started following John Sarno's prescriptions, they lost their appetite for serial medical interventions. They canceled long scheduled surgical procedures, usually at the 11th hour, citing a new perception that their problems were emotional rather than orthopedic. They stopped getting MRIs. They stopped getting spinal injections. They didn't show up for their physical therapy appointments. And John Sarno helped millions and millions of Americans with lower back pain. So some things really do help, right? There's excellent physical therapy. There's excellent Alexander technique. There's excellent McKinsey method physical therapy. There's positional release, aka strain counter strain. These things work by and large. Epidurals, standard issue physical therapy where they bill your insurance doesn't work. So this series of readings from the book Crooked on the back pain industry came about because one unhappy customer was the assassin Luigi Magione.
Barry said. He was very smart, a pretty big math guy, really well read and quite well liked, to be honest. I don't have any bad memories of him. He had a very healthy social circle. Race Saunders, 27, now a software developer who lives in California, recalled being study buddies with Mr. Magione in high school. He remembered Mr. Magione as a hard worker. We were all definitely leaning toward computer science, Mr. Saunders said. In college, Mr. Magione excelled in that field. The commencement program for the University of Pennsylvania's class of 2020 lists Mr. Magione as a member of the school's chapter of Eta Kappa Nu, an academic honor society for students in electrical and computer engineering that was founded in 1904. The society is selective, inviting only the top quarter of the junior class and top third of the senior class in those majors for membership.
I appreciate this Reason magazine discussion of the healthcare industry. Why socialists are cheering the death of an insurance CEO.
Shifting gears here and going, but staying on murder. There's an old joke that I've been reminded of recently about how I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out in Midtown Manhattan last week. There was a brutal assassination of a 50-year-old business executive, and somehow a health policy debate broke out in the August newspapers of the land. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down on the street by a grinning and kind of handsome young hoodie-wearing guy who had reportedly written on his bullets casings the words delay, deny, and depose in apparent reference to tactics that health insurance companies stand accused of preferring when they refuse to cover life-saving treatments. To the surprise of many, including me, a bunch of overly online, mostly left of center, morally cretinous ghouls, led unsurprisingly by former New York Times and Washington Post social media columnist Taylor Lorenz, have cheered on the assassination, going so far in Lorenz's case to post the identifying information of other healthcare executives, while arguing that the health insurance industry, we can just call it the insurancy, sure, is directly responsible for tens of thousands of deaths that don't get as mourned as much as Brian Thompson's. Peterson's health care policy discussion has indeed broken out, whether we appreciate the premise or not. Can we start with what's being said about that? Within a reasonable time frame, I'm hitting the clock now, could you walk us through some of the common critiques that we've been hearing over the last several days about United Health and other insurance companies, and maybe compare those to reality, and then give a sense of why the actual reality works the way that it does? Go.
Wow, that's an awful lot. I could write you a book, but instead of doing that, what I'm going to say is that the complaints about United Health are basically that United Health denies claims. And there's some data to suggest that United Health denies claims at higher rates than other insurers, perhaps at the highest rate of any of the private health insurance companies, or the major ones anyway. And so people are mad at that, about that. And in some ways, I can understand that, because that sucks. Health insurance bureaucracy is deeply unpleasant to deal with. And getting rejected on something where you feel like this is vital or necessary or has been recommended by a doctor, it's no fun. No one likes that. So I'm not going to say oh, this is just wonderful. At the same time, what is your preferred system is the question that I want to ask, because every single healthcare system in the developed world that exists in some ways rations care or denies care somehow or another. And sometimes that's done through wait times. In Canada and the United Kingdom in particular, you just have incredibly long lines for wait. So they pretend that they just have that care is just sort of generally available, free at the point of care for everyone, and it's there and it's equal. And the thing is that the way they do that is that in the United Kingdom, you're going to.
So human desires, human wants are infinite. Human resources, however, are limited. How do you ration those resources? Do you do it on the basis of politics, or do you do it on the basis of the free market, or some combination?
Wait 14, 18, and possibly more than that number of weeks in order to see a doctor, in order to get treated. In Canada, it is similar. Care is rationed through waiting, and so that's the way that they do that. And it's the government that does that. And it's the government that says, you can't have this or you can't have it right now. And so every single system has that. Some other systems also deal with their care issues by, say, paying providers much less. So in France, for example, but also in the UK, doctors make an awful lot less money. And we saw a related debate about that touched on this happen in the United States just over the past week or two, where the anesthesiologists were complaining that there was a health insurer that was like, we're going to put new rules on how much we're going to pay you based on the time that you spend in surgery and that sort of thing. Basically, it was a move designed to limit how much anesthesiologists get paid. Anesthesiologists, on average, make something like $440,000, $450,000 a year, and they're doing pretty well. And so this was an insurer basically saying, we're going to pay something like Medicare rates and use that to try and push back on what we believe is excessive payments to anesthesiologists. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the payments are excessive or that Medicare's rates are right, but what I am going to tell you is that there has to be some sort of pressure in the system not to overconsume. Otherwise, you end up with a system that cannot provide. There's always going to be someone who says there's going to be a decision point somewhere, whether it is the government or whether it is a health insurance company, that is going to say, in some cases, you are not going to get this care. We are going to ration this. We are going to allocate this accordingly. And because we have so systematically suppressed prices all throughout the healthcare system, we don't have a good way of doing that. Instead, we have these kind of random, arbitrary bureaucratic systems that make everything opaque, that make it hard to figure out what's going on. That's true in the government systems. It's true in the highly regulated public-private system, of which a huge amount of healthcare spending in the United States, by the way, is government spending, not private. So whatever system you have, there is going to be someone who at some point says no. We don't have prices, which is the best way to allocate scarce resources. What we need in healthcare are real markets, real prices, and real market signals. We don't have that, and it makes people mad because what this system tells you is you're not the system just constantly says, well, you can't have this, and we're not really going to explain why.
Catherine, if we're grading on a curve of people will die, can you think of any other policy sort of disagreements in which one side is advocating and sometimes winning out on a set of government policies that could tangibly and almost definitely will tangibly lead to more deaths than if not?
All government policies are that in the end, I suppose.
Wow. If you're an anarchist.
Well, I'm actually not sure what I was supposed to say. I think you were prompting me to say something, but I really do believe it's kind of all policies. So
donate to Reason, and this will get better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Donate to Reason is what I wanted to say. I mean, this comes up absolutely everywhere, and it shows up in the National Highway Transportation Safety Calculus about whether or not they need to mandate that your car makes a loud beep when you get too close to the bumper in front of you. It shows up in NASA deciding whether they should spend $1 billion for every rocket launch to make sure that not one astronaut dies. It shows up, in ways that make people uncomfortable in all of course, in the COVID vaccination and lockdown debate. And it makes people uncomfortable every single time it happens because on a very fundamental level, we would like to not have to choose. We would like to never, ever have to say no to something that might save someone's life or improve someone's quality of life. But in the end, to say yes to every single one of those things is to, demand and take the labor of the people who provide those things, sometimes against their consent, and also to never.
Okay, I think the free market arguments for healthcare are fairly self-evident. Norman Podhoretz is not a MAGA man. He's not a big fan of Donald Trump. He's a neoconservative. But he displayed some empathy on yesterday's Commentary Magazine podcast for the Donald Trump position on wanting to jail his enemies.
Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, Republicans who served on the January 6th committee. And he said, I'm not going to do it. They should be in jail. Okay. It's like, oh, that's terrible. How can you say you shouldn't throw your political opponents in jail? Everybody should get a blanket pardon. Michelle Goldberg says everybody should get a blanket pardon. I don't know who else is saying everybody should get a blanket pardon. I just want to parse this out just a little bit because Adam Kinzinger was a member of Congress. Liz Cheney was a member of Congress. They served on this committee. They were appointed to serve on this committee. The purpose of this committee was to create for all intents and purposes, an indictment to develop charges that could be used against Trump by Jack Smith in creating the January 6th case against Trump for attempting to overthrow the United States, the government of the United States of America. So maybe this is not equal. Maybe I'm not being fair. He's a private citizen as he's speaking right now. They weren't. They wanted to use their political power as elected officials to throw Donald Trump in jail.
All right, this is the best presentation of empathy that I have heard about Donald Trump's desire to jail those who tried to jail him.
If his response to them is, they should be in jail, somebody separate out the strands according to which what they did was okay, but what he is doing is not okay, except for politesse and good breeding and, the America that we would all like to see, where political combat is dealt with at a much higher level. I will stipulate all of that. The political process in the United States was harnessed from 2021 through 2024 in the Congress and in the Justice Department and elsewhere, including in the New York City District Attorney's Office and the New York State Attorney General's Office and the Georgia, whoever the hell Fani Willis's office is, and in Florida, to send Donald Trump to jail so he could not become president. If he emotionally says, you know what I would like to see all those people who did this to me thrown in jail. Is that really so terrible? I'm just...
All right. Thoughtful analysis there from John Podhoretz. All right. Dan from the morning meeting, Dan Turrentine here from yesterday morning's Mark Alperin show.
Steps forward to make comments. Biden still hasn't addressed the escalation in Ukraine. And I think it's like the kind of stages of recovery for Democrats. Like, this is humiliating for Joe Biden to be so absent and just not really publicly engaged. Even you would think he would be doing something to try to set traps for Trump before he comes in. I mean, just raw politics. You usually do some executive orders and other things that who's coming after you then has to undo, and you hammer him for undoing them. He's just totally not there. And that, I think, is pretty humiliating, and the party's turning to anger now.
So I think there's two sides to this, right? Where the Biden side is obvious. He's not present. But it's the vacuum that Trump. What's unique about this moment is the other side too. Trump's on the stage, being greeted in France as if is the current commander in chief. The way that Macron welcomed him to France was unbelievable. The pictures of him.
I've never in my career I've never seen anything like that.
Right, and so again, it's a double-sided coin here, where we've got how Biden is going out, but also how Trump's coming in. He's cutting deals. He's on the world stage. He'll be at the Army-Navy game this weekend. I mean, this is a guy who is, you would think he would be sitting back making announcements, whatever, but he's filling the void. I bet you if you polled people, they think the inauguration was a couple of weeks ago and that he's already president. I think what's going to be interesting, though, in my mind, is how this all kind of I mean, look, this gets back to what we talked about with Biden on the campaign trail initially and then Kamala. I question whether or not it's not that he's not capable. You don't think he'd want to go to France to see the opening of Notre Dame? And I mean, like as Dan pointed out, he talks about his Catholic faith. You would think that would be something that he just personally would want to do instead of sending the first lady. I wonder, and I'm being serious in this, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I wonder if there's a bigger issue at hand and whether he can go. Like he's intentionally avoiding stuff. This is his wheelhouse, going to international events and glad handing. And so I'm starting to wonder whether there's a bigger issue at hand.
Yeah, I'll be curious today if stuff leaks. And Sean, my wife said the same thing. We were talking this weekend because I mean, those pictures in France were just stunning. I mean, You're just like, where is? And she's like, I wonder if he can travel.
But Dan, go back to the pictures of Angola. When President Biden was there are pictures of him sleeping. There's a bunch. I mean, it doesn't look good. And I do wonder when we hear about the leaks that Mark's referencing tonight. That's
what I was going to say. Yeah.
Is he engaged, or does he come down, take a quick photo op, and go back upstairs?
Yeah. So we had 3 straight presidents who were pretty young men when they left after full terms, right? Clinton, Bush, and Obama, and none of them really sought the limelight. Clinton did a little bit. Clinton did global initiative, but all of them had normal post-presidencies in the sense that they got book deals, they gave speeches for $250,000 and up, they did lots of international travel, giving even more lucrative speeches. They played the roles they wanted to play. Bush painted, and Obama, started making Netflix stuff, and Clinton did the global initiative. But, and they all had libraries, although Obama's is financed in a private way. But Biden may never live to see the building of a library, in part because of his age, but also because he's going to have trouble raising money. And I don't know, is he going to get a big book deal? Is he going to get paid speeches? Like, he's about to go from a guy who was a senior senator for decades, then vice president, then out briefly, but then back as president. Is going to be a shock to the system. You think he's feeling kind of irrelevant now? And I remember at the end of the Clinton administration, he was. I've told this story before. Hopefully, I haven't told it here, or people start to put in the comments that I've lost my mind. But at the end of the Clinton administration, he got a bunch of reporters, like including me, who'd covered him in '92, to fly down to Arkansas during the transition, right before he pardoned Mark Rich, to give a speech to the Arkansas legislature about, how he sees the future or whatever. And it just in like this ridiculous attempt to get attention because he felt so overshadowed by Bush being elected and the recount and all of that.
And on September 11th of 2001, Bill Clinton, I believe, was in New Zealand or Australia giving a speech on the pointlessness of national borders, right, making the case for a borderless world. All right, I want to close out with something to take the edge off. Step 3, Big Book Study with Joe McDonald.
Is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century, politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity. So we're just bringing it home. Whatever it is that I'm disturbed about out there, is it not some unrest within me? And this is a book of experience. If you're not there, that's fine. That's what the process does, is reveal to us what the world's really showing us. Okay? So selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So can you relate to being driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity?
Oh, yeah.
Without giving meaning to those words, just being driven by thought and emotion.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to get to a disciplined thought life, and we want to be empowered by this power that then employs our thought life, and we're no longer driven by these things. In fact, we use them as tools to win others, to help others see the light. Does it make sense? Okay. All right. So sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So if you're new to this, remember this is a book of past tense. We know that many of us came here from terrible abuse as children and maybe even into adulthood. We're not saying that abuse had anything to do with you. What we are saying is if you got the grace to get through it, you'll be a powerful witness to others going through it. And we're going to convert the experience, whatever the experience was, we're going to introduce you to power to convert the experience. Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, let's leave it there.